Across the galaxy, the Force binds all things, linking every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For thousands of generations, it has been the ultimate power, light and dark, life and death, order and chaos. But what happens when something arrives that exists entirely outside its reach? When a warrior forged by science, not mysticism, crashes into a galaxy that has never known anything like him? The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on the dune sea, their heat creating shimmering waves across endless sand. Local moisture farmers had seen many things fall from the sky: satellites, Imperial probe droids, occasionally a smuggler's ship trying to avoid customs. But they had never seen anything like the blazing streak of blue-white energy that tore through the atmosphere at noon, accompanied by a sound like reality itself screaming. The object, no, the person, hit the sand 3 miles outside Mos Eisley, with enough force to create a crater 20 feet wide. Sand turned to glass from the heat. The shockwave rippled outward, knocking over a nearby land speeder and sending its Jawa occupants scrambling for cover, chattering in panicked voices. In the center of the crater, Steve Rogers lay unconscious, his uniform scorched but intact, his vibranium shield half buried in molten sand beside him. The last thing he remembered was the Tesseract's energy going haywire during the Hydra facility raid, reality folding in on itself. And then, nothing. Just the sensation of being pulled through something vast and empty, a space between spaces where even time seemed to lose meaning. He didn't know how long he'd been out. Seconds, hours, days. Steve's enhanced healing factor kicked in first, repairing the minor burns and contusions from atmospheric entry. His eyes snapped open, instantly alert despite the disorientation. Blue sky, no, wait, beige sky. 2 suns. He was definitely not in Europe anymore, not even on Earth. He sat up slowly, every tactical instinct screaming at him to assess his surroundings. Desert. Endless desert in every direction. Strange rock formations in the distance. No buildings, no people, no. A blaster bolt hit the sand 2 feet from his head. Steve's reflexes took over before conscious thought. He rolled left, grabbed his shield from the sand, and came up in a defensive crouch. 3 figures approached from the crater's rim, humanoid, but their proportions were wrong. Too short, wrapped in brown robes, with glowing yellow eyes visible beneath their hoods. They carried crude weapons that looked like a cross between rifles and medieval crossbows. Tusken Raiders, though Steve had no way of knowing that. The lead raider raised his Gadurfi stick, a brutal weapon combining axe blade and blunt club, and shouted something in a harsh, barking language. The others raised their cycler rifles, ancient projectile weapons that would punch through standard armor. "I don't want to fight you," Steve said, raising one hand while keeping his shield ready, the universal gesture for peace. "I'm not your enemy." The Tuskens didn't care about Earth gestures. They opened fire. Steve's shield came up instantly, the first slugs clanging off vibranium with a sound like hammers on an anvil. The unique metal absorbed the kinetic energy completely. No ricochet, no penetration. Steve had blocked Nazi bullets, Chitauri energy weapons, and even one of Thor's hammer strikes. These primitive projectiles might as well have been spitballs. But he didn't return fire. He had no weapon except the shield, and these people, aliens, natives, might just be defending their territory. Steve had fought enough wars to know the difference between soldiers and scared locals. "Stand down," he shouted, moving forward with the shield blocking the continued rifle fire. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." The lead Tusken shrieked in rage and charged with his Gadurfi raised high. Steve waited until the last second, then stepped aside with enhanced speed that made the attack look like slow motion. He brought the shield's edge down on the weapon's wooden shaft, snapping it cleanly in two. His other hand shot out, grabbing the Raider's arm and using the alien's momentum to flip him over Steve's hip. The Tusken hit the sand hard but alive, wind knocked out but uninjured. The other two hesitated, clearly not expecting their prey to move like that. Steve used the moment to vault backward up the crater wall, putting distance between them. His super soldier physiology handled the 10-foot jump easily, landing in a 3-point stance that kicked up sand. From the higher ground, he could see more clearly. A settlement in the distance, maybe 5 miles away. Scattered buildings, landing pads, ships that looked nothing like anything from Earth. The Tuskens were already regrouping, calling out in their guttural language. More figures appeared from behind the rock formations, at least a dozen, all armed. "Definitely time to go," Steve muttered. He ran. Enhanced muscles propelled him across the sand at speeds that would shame Olympic sprinters. The shield on his back caught the twin sun's light as he moved, creating flashes of red, white, and blue against the beige landscape. Behind him, the Tuskens gave chase on creatures that looked like shaggy, horned dinosaurs. Banthas, the native transport animals. Steve maintained his pace easily, his enhanced endurance meaning he could run at this speed for hours without fatigue. But the settlement was still miles away, and he had no idea what he'd find there. Allies? More hostiles? He needed information, supplies, and most importantly, he needed to figure out where or when he was. The Tesseract had done something to him, thrown him through space, maybe through time. For all he knew, this could be Earth's future, some apocalyptic desert world scenario, or an alien planet, or... His thoughts cut off as something screamed overhead. Steve looked up to see a spacecraft banking hard, its twin-ion engines glowing blue-white. The design was utilitarian, aggressive, a military patrol craft. It bore a symbol he'd never seen before, a geometric crest that looked almost like a gear or a flower, rendered in stark white against dark gray hull plating. The Imperial crest, the symbol of the Galactic Empire. The ship slowed, hovering above him with repulsor lifts kicking up sand tornadoes. A loudspeaker crackled to life, the voice cold and clipped with military precision. "Unidentified sentient. You are in violation of Imperial airspace and disturbing the peace. Stand down immediately or be fired upon." Steve stopped running, shield raised, squinting against the sand and engine wash. The ship's weapons, twin laser cannons, tracked him with mechanical precision. He'd crashed on an alien world, been attacked by natives, and now some kind of military force was threatening him. Just another Tuesday for Captain America. "I'm not looking for trouble," Steve shouted over the engine noise. "I'm a soldier. I need to speak with your commanding officer." There was a pause, then the loudspeaker again. "You will be taken into custody for questioning. Resist and you will be eliminated." The ship's boarding ramp extended, and 4 figures emerged. They wore white armor from head to toe, full environmental suits with T-shaped visors, and carrying weapons that hummed with contained energy. Stormtroopers, the Empire's faceless soldiers, though Steve only saw them as another occupying force. He'd seen enough occupying forces to last several lifetimes. "Drop your weapon," the lead trooper commanded. His voice filtered through his helmet speakers. Steve looked at his shield, then back at the troopers. "This isn't a weapon, it's a shield. Drop it, now." The Tuskens had stopped their pursuit, watching from a distance. Smart. They knew better than to engage Imperial forces. Steve made a decision. He needed information more than he needed a fight. And these soldiers, whoever they worked for, clearly had resources, ships, and answers. He could cooperate now, gather intelligence, and make his move when he understood the situation better. It's what he'd done in Adzano when he rescued Bucky in the 107th. Sometimes you had to get captured to infiltrate. "All right," Steve said, slowly lowering the shield to the sand. "I'll come peacefully, but I want answers. Where am I? What planet is this?" The lead trooper gestured to his squad, who moved forward with weapons trained. "You're on Tatooine, Outer Rim territories, under jurisdiction of the Galactic Empire. That's all you need to know." Tatooine, Outer Rim, Galactic Empire. None of those words made sense together, but Steve filed them away. He'd figure it out. As the Stormtroopers secured his hands with energy binders, some kind of glowing restraints that hummed with contained power, and retrieved his shield, Steve caught one trooper examining it with obvious confusion. "Sir, this material, it's not registering on any scanner. Not Durasteel, not Cortosis, not even Beskar. What is it?" The lead trooper hefted the shield, clearly surprised by its light weight. "Command will want to see this. And him. Let's move." They hauled Steve aboard the patrol craft, the ramp closing with a hydraulic hiss. Through the viewport, he watched Tatooine's surface drop away as the ship climbed toward orbit. Somewhere up there, among the stars that looked nothing like Earth's constellations, were answers. And if this Galactic Empire was anything like the last empire he'd fought, Steve had a feeling he wouldn't be cooperating for long. Because Captain America didn't serve tyrants, he destroyed them. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Imperial patrol craft docked with a larger vessel in high orbit, a Gosanti-class cruiser bristling with weapons and communications arrays. Through the viewport, Steve caught his first real glimpse of this galaxy's technology. Ships of various sizes moved in organized patterns, their engines leaving trails of blue light. Some were massive wedge-shaped vessels that dwarfed anything Earth had ever built, their surfaces covered in weapons batteries and hangar bays. Others were smaller, sleeker, clearly designed for speed rather than firepower. And everywhere, that same symbol, the Imperial crest. The Stormtroopers marched him through corridors of gray metal and harsh white lighting, their boots echoing in perfect unison. Steve's tactical mind cataloged everything: guard positions, camera placements, door mechanisms, potential escape routes, old habits. The architecture reminded him of Hydra facilities, all function and no humanity, sterile, oppressive. They passed a viewport showing Tatooine below, and Steve paused despite the troopers shoving him forward. The planet was almost entirely desert, with only small patches of darker terrain. 2 suns hung in the black. He hadn't imagined that. Binary star system. Definitely not Earth. Definitely not anywhere in his universe. "Keep moving," the lead trooper growled. The interrogation room was exactly what Steve expected. Bare metal walls, a single table bolted to the floor, restraint mechanisms built into the chair. They secured him with both the energy binders and mechanical locks, clearly not taking chances. His shield sat on the table, reflecting the overhead lights. "Wait here. The commander will want to question you personally." The troopers filed out, leaving Steve alone with his thoughts. He tested the restraints carefully. The energy binders hummed against his wrists, creating a tingling sensation that suggested an electric shock if he pulled too hard. The mechanical locks were quality work, not vibranium, but some kind of dense alloy that wouldn't break easily. He could probably snap them with enough force, but that would tip his hand. Better to wait, observe, and learn. The door hissed open 15 minutes later. The man who entered wore a gray-green uniform with a rank insignia Steve didn't recognize, some kind of officer. His posture screamed military academy, his face sharp and calculating. Behind him came two more soldiers in black uniforms with different armor configurations than the Stormtroopers. Elite guards, Steve guessed. "I am Commander Grain," the officer said, his basic accent crisp and educated. "Imperial Security Bureau. You are going to tell me exactly what you are, where you came from, and what you're doing in Imperial space." Steve met his gaze steadily. "I'm Captain Steve Rogers, United States Army, serial number." He paused. Those numbers wouldn't mean anything here. "I was conducting a military operation when something went wrong. Some kind of energy surge. Next thing I knew, I woke up on that desert planet." Grain circled the table slowly. "Predatory. Captain, interesting. You claim military rank, yet you carry no identification. Your uniform bears symbols of no known government, and you speak basic despite clearly being from a species with no record in Imperial databases." He picked up the shield, examining it. "And then there's this. Our scans can't identify the metal. It's not on any periodic table in the known galaxy." "It's called vibranium," Steve said. "Where I come from, it's the rarest metal on the planet, nearly indestructible. That shield has taken hits from weapons you couldn't imagine." "Vibranium." Grain tested the word. "And where exactly do you come from, Captain Rogers?" "Earth, Sol system, third planet from the sun, though apparently not your son." Grain's expression didn't change, but Steve caught the slight tension in his shoulders. Uncertainty. Good. The officer set the shield down carefully. "There is no Earth in any Imperial charts. No Sol system. Either you're delusional, lying, or..." He leaned forward. "You're from somewhere very far away indeed. Perhaps beyond the unknown regions. Perhaps somewhere even our star charts don't reach." Steve said nothing. Let them draw their own conclusions. "Your physical capabilities are remarkable," Grain continued. "My men report you outran a bantha-mounted Tusken raiding party. You disarmed one of them with your bare hands. The medical scans we ran during transport showed bone density 40% higher than normal human baseline, muscle fiber composition, unlike anything in our databases, and a cellular structure that suggests significant genetic or chemical enhancement." "Super soldier serum," Steve said, "made me stronger, faster, more resilient. I was enhanced to fight in a war, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. A manufactured warrior." Grain nodded slowly. "The Empire has use for individuals with your capabilities. Inquisitors, Imperial intelligence operatives, even the Emperor's personal guard, all are enhanced in various ways. Some through technology, others through other means." The way he said "other means" carried weight, religious weight. Steve filed that away too. "I'm not interested in serving your empire," Steve said flatly. "I fought one empire already. Beat them too." Grain's smile was cold. "You're in no position to refuse anything, Captain. You're a dimensional anomaly on an Imperial-controlled world, carrying unknown technology, with no identification or legal standing. By law, you're either a potential intelligence asset or a security threat. The Empire will decide which. Then I guess the Empire's going to be disappointed." The door hissed open again, interrupting Grain's response. A new figure entered, and Steve felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. This one was different. Tall, dressed in flowing dark robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was gaunt, scarred, with eyes that burned with an intensity Steve had only seen in fanatics. He moved with predatory grace, each step deliberate. "Commander," the robed figure said, his voice soft, but carrying absolute authority. "I will take over this interrogation." Grain stiffened. Sir, I was just... You were wasting time. The robed man approached the table, and Steve noticed something hanging from his belt. A cylinder, maybe a foot long, metallic and worn with use. Leave us. Grain hesitated only a second before saluting and exiting with his guards. The door sealed with finality. Steve and the robed figure regarded each other in silence. You are not force sensitive, the man finally said. Not a question, a statement. I sense nothing from you. No presence in the force at all. You are a void, a blank space where something should exist. I don't know what that means, Steve replied honestly. The force connects all living things. It flows through every being in this galaxy, binding them together. Light and dark, creation and destruction. Even the weakest minds have some echo of it. The man circled Steve like a predator circling prey. But you are silent, empty, as if you don't belong to this universe at all. The man's hand moved to the cylinder on his belt, and Steve tensed. Weapon. Had to be. My name is Inquisitor Kovic, the robed figure continued. I serve the Empire by hunting those who would misuse the Force. Rogue Jedi, dark side cultists, Force-sensitive rebels. He stopped directly in front of Steve. You are none of these things, yet you pose a different kind of threat. I'm not a threat to anyone, unless they give me a reason to be. Kovic's smile was cruel. Spoken like a soldier. Tell me, Captain Rogers, in your war, the one you claim to have won, did you kill? Only when I had to. And how many times did you have to? Steve held his gaze. As many times as it took to stop evil men from conquering the world, from killing millions, from building an empire on fear and oppression. An empire. Kovic's hand rested on the cylinder. And you think the Galactic Empire is the same? I think any government that needs soldiers in identical armor, weapons pointed at civilians, and secret police interrogating people in locked rooms probably isn't fighting for freedom. Kovic's expression darkened. You know nothing of this galaxy, nothing of the chaos that came before, the clone wars that tore systems apart, the Jedi Order's failure to maintain peace, the separatists who would have destroyed the Republic entirely. His voice grew heated. The Empire brought order, stability, an end to decades of bloodshed. At what cost? Steve challenged. How many planets have you occupied? How many people live in fear? How many voices have been silenced? The cost of peace is always high. Kovic activated the cylinder. A blade of pure red energy erupted from the hilt with a snap hiss that made Steve's enhanced hearing ring. The weapon hummed with contained violence. 3 feet of superheated plasma that cast the room in crimson light. Steve had never seen anything like it. A sword made of energy, the air around it shimmering from the heat. This is a lightsaber, Kovic said softly. The weapon of the Force-sensitive. It can cut through nearly anything in this galaxy. Durasteel, reinforced armor, blast doors. He brought the blade close to the table, and the metal started to glow red where the heat touched it. Even your mysterious shield. Would you like to test it? Steve's jaw tightened. Threatening me won't get you the answers you want. This isn't a threat, Captain. This is an education. Kovic deactivated the lightsaber and returned it to his belt. You are in a galaxy at war. The Empire maintains order against those who would return us to chaos. The so-called Rebel Alliance. Terrorists who destroy Imperial facilities, assassinate governors, and hide behind the myth of freedom while ordinary citizens die in the crossfire. Sounds like propaganda, Steve said. Sounds like you've already chosen a side. I haven't chosen anything. I don't even understand this war yet. Kovic leaned close, his scarred face inches from Steve's. Then understand this. You are a weapon, Captain Rogers. Your enhanced abilities, your combat training, your moral certainty, all tools. The only question is who will wield you. The Empire offers purpose, resources, and the chance to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. His eyes glittered dangerously. Refuse, and you will be eliminated as a security threat. Those are your options. Steve had heard this speech before. Different tyrant, same lines. Join or die. Serve or be destroyed. Hydra, the Red Skull, even some of the more ruthless Allied commanders. They all thought power came from forcing others to comply. They were all wrong. I've got a third option, Steve said quietly. Oh? I break out of here, find the people you're oppressing, and help them fight back. Because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. Kovic stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. Brave words from a man in restraints. He moved toward the door. You'll remain here while I consult with my superiors. The Grand Inquisitor will want to meet you personally. Until then, I suggest you reconsider your position. The door sealed behind him, leaving Steve alone again. But alone was good. Alone gave him time to think, to plan. The restraints were tough, but he'd broken out of worse. The question wasn't if he could escape, it was when and where he'd go afterward. Because Inquisitor Kovic had made one critical mistake. He'd confirmed that there was a rebel alliance, that people were fighting back against this empire. And wherever there were people fighting tyranny, that's where Captain America needed to be. Steve waited 2 hours by his internal clock. One of the benefits of the super soldier's serum was perfect time sense. He'd mapped the guard rotations through the subtle sounds in the corridor. Boots every 20 minutes, a patrol pair that stopped briefly at his door, then moved on. The ship's ambient hum told him engine placement, probably aft sections. Ventilation cycled every 8 minutes. Standard military efficiency. He'd also tested the restraints systematically. The energy binders responded to pressure with escalating shock warnings, sharp pain at threshold, probably lethal beyond that. But the mechanical locks were just metal, however advanced, and metal had weaknesses. The door hissed open. Steve looked up, expecting another interrogation. Instead, a mouse droid rolled in. A small black box on wheels, maybe a foot tall with various sensor arrays. It beeped cheerfully and headed straight for the corner, apparently on a cleaning routine. The guard who'd opened the door watched it enter, then sealed the door again without a second glance. Steve smiled slightly. Even in a galaxy far from home, people underestimated maintenance droids. He waited until the little droid finished its route and approached his chair, sensors scanning the floor beneath him. Then he shifted his weight, letting his boot come down firmly, but not violently, on the droid's top panel. It squeaked in alarm, wheels spinning uselessly. "Sorry, friend," Steve muttered, "but I need a favor." He applied steady pressure, using his enhanced strength carefully. The droid's casing cracked, exposing circuitry and a small power cell. Steve shifted his other foot, hooking the toe of his boot into the crack and prying wider. Sparks flew. The droid let out a descending whine and went silent. The door didn't open. No alarms. Good. Minor malfunctions probably happened regularly. Steve maneuvered the broken droid closer with his feet, awkward but possible. He managed to tear free a piece of its internal framework, some kind of reinforced alloy rod, maybe 6 inches long. Not much, but enough. He wedged the rod between his wrist and the mechanical lock, then applied leverage. The super soldier's serum let him exert force far beyond human norms. The lock's housing groaned, metal bending. The energy binders sparked, sending painful shocks up his arm. But Steve gritted his teeth and pushed harder. The lock snapped. His right hand came free, still wrapped in the energy binder, but no longer anchored to the chair. The shocks intensified as the binder's sensors detected tampering. Steve had maybe 30 seconds before the pain became incapacitating. He used 20. His free hand grabbed the rod and jammed it into the left lock's mechanism, twisting violently. Enhanced muscles made short work of the internal components. The second lock broke, and Steve yanked both hands up simultaneously, pulling against the energy binder's connection point on the chair. The binders discharged their full lighthouse voltage into him. It felt like being hit by lightning, every muscle seizing, nervous system screaming. But Steve had been frozen in ice for 70 years and woken up. He'd been shot, stabbed, blown up, and thrown from buildings. Pain was just information, and information could be ignored when necessary. He roared through clenched teeth and pulled. The connection point tore free from the chair with a shower of sparks. The binders went dead, their power source destroyed. Steve sagged forward, smoking slightly, every nerve ending singing with residual agony. But he was free. The door burst open 15 seconds later. The energy discharge had triggered alarms after all. 2 stormtroopers rushed in, blasters raised. Steve was already moving. He grabbed the broken chair and hurled it. Enhanced strength turned furniture into a projectile weapon. The chair hit the first trooper center mass, sending him sprawling backward into his partner. Both went down in a tangle of white armor. Steve crossed the room in 3 enhanced strides, faster than the troopers could track. He grabbed the first trooper's blaster, some kind of energy rifle, and twisted it from the soldier's grip. The weapon felt alien in his hands, but the trigger was obvious enough. He fired into the ceiling panel. The blast punched through metal and wiring, showering the corridor in sparks and smoke. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Steve used the confusion to grab his shield from the table and bolt into the corridor. More stormtroopers appeared at the far end, weapons up. They opened fire immediately. Steve brought the shield up on pure instinct. The blaster bolts, superheated plasma packets he'd learn later, struck vibranium and dissipated completely. No ricochet, no penetration, just absorption. The same way it handled bullets and energy weapons back home. "Target is armed and extremely dangerous," one trooper shouted into his comlink. "Requesting backup, Deck 7. Steve threw the shield. It flew with perfect aerodynamic precision, the product of thousands of hours of practice and enhanced spatial awareness. The shield struck the lead trooper's blaster, sending the weapon flying, then ricocheted off the wall and hit the second trooper in the helmet hard enough to crack the faceplate. The trooper went down. The shield completed its arc and returned to Steve's hand, exactly as thrown. Physics-defying. Maybe. But vibranium had properties that made conventional physics suggestions rather than rules. The remaining troopers hesitated. They'd just watched their target do something impossible. Steve didn't give them time to recover. He charged forward, shield leading. 2 more blaster bolts deflected harmlessly. He slammed into the first trooper shield first, the impact sending the soldier crashing into the wall hard enough to dent the armor plating. His other hand shot out in a precise strike to the second trooper's neck seal, not lethal, but enough to trigger the armor's emergency knockout response when the neural sensor detected trauma. Both troopers collapsed. "Sorry," Steve muttered, already moving. He didn't want to hurt these soldiers. They were probably just following orders, same as any military. But he wouldn't let them stop him either. The ship's corridor branched ahead. Left led toward what sounded like engineering, louder engines, more vibration. Right led toward a hangar bay, if the sounds of ships and the smell of fuel meant anything. Hangar. He needed a ship. Steve ran right, his enhanced speed eating up distance. More stormtroopers appeared, these ones ready for him. They'd formed a firing line, 6 of them, weapons charged. "Stand down," the sergeant barked. "There's nowhere to run." Steve didn't slow down. He analyzed the corridor in milliseconds, too narrow for them to spread out properly, overhead pipes and conduits, emergency pressure door 50 feet behind their position. He threw the shield low. It struck the lead trooper's knee at an angle that sent the soldier spinning into his neighbor. The shield bounced off the floor, ricocheted off the ceiling support beam, and struck the pressure door's control panel. Sparks flew. The door began its emergency seal protocol. "Fall back," the sergeant shouted, realizing the danger. Too late. The pressure door slammed shut, cutting the firing line in half. 3 troopers were trapped on Steve's side, 3 on the other. Steve caught his returning shield and faced the 3. "I don't want to hurt you, just stay down." To their credit, they tried anyway. Military discipline. The first swing of a rifle butt met vibranium with a clang. Steve spun, using the shield's edge to strike the second trooper's weapon arm, hard enough to disable, not break. His boot caught the third trooper in the chest, precisely calculated to maximize impact on the armor while minimizing injury to the person inside. All 3 went down within seconds. Steve grabbed one of their blasters and kept moving. Behind him, the pressure door screeched as the trapped troopers tried to override it. He had maybe 2 minutes before they got through or found another route. The hangar bay opened before him. A massive space filled with TIE fighters, cargo shuttles, and a few smaller craft he didn't recognize. Dozens of personnel moved with organized purpose, loading supplies and running maintenance. The bay doors showed stars beyond. They were still in orbit around Tatooine. An alarm blared. Red lights strobed. "Intruder in main hangar," a voice announced over the ship's PA. "All personnel, subdue or eliminate on sight." Personnel scattered. Some ran for cover. Others, the ones in officer uniforms or specialized armor, drew weapons. Steve spotted his target, a small patrol craft near the bay opening, clearly prepped for launch, the same type that had captured him on Tatooine. He knew its basic layout now. He sprinted for it, shield deflecting the blaster fire that erupted from every direction. His enhanced reflexes let him track multiple shooters simultaneously, positioning the shield to intercept each bolt a fraction of a second before it arrived. Training from fighting Chitauri in New York, from the urban warfare in dozens of missions. Different weapons, same principles. A blast door began descending, trying to seal him off from the ship. Steve slid under it baseball style, shield sparking against the deck plating. He rolled to his feet on the other side and bounded up the ship's boarding ramp, just as the door sealed behind him. The cockpit was cramped, designed for 2 pilots. Imperial design philosophy prioritized function over comfort. Steve dropped into the pilot's seat and stared at the control panel. Nothing made sense. Alien symbols, switches with no labels he could read, displays showing information in formats he didn't understand. He might as well have been looking at ancient hieroglyphics. "Come on," he muttered, hands hovering over controls. Universal design principles. Power, engine start, navigation. A blaster bolt hit the cockpit canopy, spider-webbing the transparent steel. Stormtroopers had breached the sealed blast door. Steve made educated guesses. Big red button, probably bad. Green indicators, probably good. The yoke in front of him was familiar enough. Flight controls existed in every universe. He pulled what looked like an ignition lever. The ship's engines screamed to life, repulsor lifts engaging with a hum that rattled his teeth. The ship lurched upward, clearly not designed for internal hangar activation. "Warning," a computerized voice said in accented basic. "Launch protocol not initiated. Clearance not received. Docking clamps engaged." Steve saw the clamps, mechanical arms holding the ship in place. He grabbed the yoke and pushed the throttle forward hard. The engines roared. The ship strained against the clamps. Metal groaned, then snapped. The patrol craft shot forward like a bullet, completely uncontrolled. Steve yanked the yoke sideways, narrowly avoiding a parked TIE fighter. The ship clipped a maintenance scaffold, sending tools and equipment flying. Personnel dove for cover as the careening vessel streaked toward the open bay doors. Magnetic field active, the computer warned. Atmosphere containment breach imminent. The bay's atmospheric shield was designed to keep air in while letting ships pass through slowly. Steve was going way too fast. He angled the shield in front of him protectively and gunned the engines. The ship hit the magnetic field, doing what had to be several hundred kilometers per hour. The field resisted, trying to slow him, but momentum and engine power combined to punch through. Alarms screamed. The hull superheated from friction. Then they were through into open space. Tatooine hung below, ochre and beautiful despite its harshness. The binary stars blazed in the black. And behind him, the Imperial cruiser began launching TIE fighters. 4, 6, 8 of them. Their distinctive screaming engines cutting through the vacuum. Steve fought with the controls, trying to level out. The ship spun wildly, engines sputtering. Warning lights covered the control panel. He damaged something during the escape, maybe everything. "Come on," he urged the ship. "Just a little further. Just get me to that planet." The TIE fighters were closing fast, their superior speed and maneuverability obvious. Green laser fire streaked past his canopy. Steve grabbed the yoke and dove toward Tatooine's atmosphere. The ship screamed in protest as it hit the upper atmosphere at entirely unsafe speeds. Hull plating glowed red-hot. More alarms. The computer was practically having a panic attack in multiple languages. But Steve had ridden a nuke through a portal once. Atmospheric re-entry was just another Tuesday. He fought the controls all the way down, using enhanced reflexes to compensate for the damaged systems. The TIE fighters followed initially, but broke off as the atmospheric friction intensified. They weren't designed for this kind of punishment. The desert surface rushed up to meet him. Steve pulled up hard at the last second, the ship's belly scraping sand dunes and kicking up a rooster tail of dust half a mile long. He crashed into a canyon wall, doing at least 200 kilometers per hour. The impact threw him forward into the controls despite his enhanced durability. The shield took most of the force, but Steve still felt ribs crack. The ship crumpled around him, engines dying with a final pathetic whine. Then silence, except for the ticking of cooling metal and his own labored breathing. Steve pushed the canopy open and half fell, half climbed out of the wreckage. He was alive. Injured, but his healing factor was already working on the ribs. The shield was intact, and he was free. He looked up at the sky, where the Imperial cruiser was just a bright point among the stars. They'd come looking for him. He'd bought himself time, nothing more. But time was enough. Somewhere on this planet were people who opposed the Empire, people who fought for freedom. Steve had escaped one prison only to find himself on a desert world with no allies, no supplies, and no way off planet. He'd been in worse situations. Barely. The canyon provided shade from Tatooine's twin suns, but the heat was still oppressive. Steve's uniform, designed for Earth's climate, was entirely wrong for desert survival. He'd need water soon, shelter, information about where the nearest settlement was and whether it was controlled by the Empire. First priority, inventory. He had his shield, undamaged and irreplaceable. One Imperial blaster rifle, half charged based on the indicator lights he'd figured out. The remains of his uniform, boots still good, and the crashed patrol craft, which might have supplies if he could pry open the cargo compartments. Steve spent 20 minutes searching the wreckage. The ship's emergency kit yielded a canteen of water, some kind of recycled liquid that tasted metallic but was drinkable. 2 ration bars that looked like compressed cardboard, a small medkit with unfamiliar supplies, and a handheld device that projected a holographic map when he accidentally activated it. The map showed Tatooine's surface in blue wireframe. Mos Eisley was marked 50 kilometers northwest. Other settlements dotted the display: Mos Espa, Anchorhead, smaller moisture farms. Red icons indicated Imperial patrol routes and garrison locations. And one blinking yellow marker, maybe 30 kilometers east. No label, just coordinates. Steve studied it. Not an official settlement, not marked as Imperial. Could be smugglers, could be nothing. But it was closer than Mos Eisley and less likely to have stormtroopers. He set out east as the suns began their descent toward the horizon. The super soldier serum let him maintain a steady pace that would exhaust normal humans in minutes. He ran in intervals, 20 minutes at enhanced speed, 5 walking to conserve the water supply. The shield on his back caught the dying light. His boots left clear tracks in the sand, but there was nothing he could do about that. Anyone tracking him would find him eventually. 3 hours in, Steve spotted movement on a distant dune. He dropped into a crouch immediately, using a rock outcropping for cover. His enhanced vision picked out details: 2 figures on some kind of hovering platform. Mechanical, not living. Both carried weapons. The platform approached slowly, scanning, hunting. Imperial probe droids. Though Steve didn't know that term yet. He only knew they were searching for something, and given his recent escape, that something was probably him. The droids split up, one circling north while the other headed directly toward his position. Their sensors were sweeping methodically, likely set to detect life signs or energy signatures. Steve pressed himself flat against the rock, shield positioned to block any sensor sweeps. Vibranium's unique properties sometimes interfered with detection equipment. He'd learned that fighting Hydra's advanced sensors. Hopefully the principle held here. The droid passed within 20 meters, its mechanical eye swiveling. Steve held perfectly still, barely breathing, despite not needing to for oxygen efficiency. Movement attracted attention. The droid paused. Steve's hand tightened on the blaster rifle. Then the droid's sensors swept past, apparently satisfied there was nothing but rock and sand. It rejoined its partner, and both continued their search pattern toward the west. Steve waited 5 full minutes before moving again. The probe droids were just the beginning. The Empire would send ground teams, more ships, possibly those Inquisitor types if they considered him enough of a threat. He needed allies. Fast. The yellow marker on the map led him to what looked like an abandoned moisture farm as the first sun set. Ancient vaporators stood like skeletal sentinels, their collection systems long since stripped for parts. The main building was half buried in sand, windows dark. Steve approached cautiously, shield ready. Could be a trap. Could be squatters. Could be. That's far enough, off-worlder. The voice came from behind. Steve spun, shield up. A woman stood on a dune ridge 15 meters away, silhouetted against the setting sun. She held a blaster rifle with the casual competence of someone who'd used it many times. Her clothing was practical desert gear. Sand-colored robes, goggles pushed up on her forehead, a moisture recycler around her neck. Human, possibly mid-30s, with sun-weathered skin and suspicious eyes. "I don't want trouble," Steve said, keeping his hands visible. "I'm just passing through." "In an Imperial uniform? With Imperial tech?" She gestured at the blaster rifle slung across his back. "You're either the worst spy the Empire's ever sent, or the dumbest deserter I've ever seen." "Neither. It's complicated. It always is." She didn't lower her weapon. "Saw the smoke from your crash landing. Whole planet probably saw it. Empire's going crazy looking for you. Probe droids, patrol craft, even heard they called in one of those Inquisitor types. Her eyes narrowed. What did you do to piss them off so bad? Refused to join them, escaped custody, stole a ship. That's it? She actually laughed. Stars, they really don't like being told no. She finally lowered her rifle slightly. Name's Kira Strand. I'm what you'd generously call a scout for people who'd prefer the Empire not find them. Steve Rogers, Captain U.S. Army? He paused, though that probably doesn't mean anything here. It doesn't, but you've got that look. Career military, seen combat, used to giving orders and having people follow them. Kira descended the dune with practiced ease. Problem is, Captain, this isn't your army, and those orders won't mean much in the Outer Rim. I'm starting to figure that out. She studied him openly now, taking in the shield, his physique, the way he held himself. That armor on your back, it's not Beskar, but it stopped blaster fire in your escape. My contact saw footage before the Empire locked it down. You moved faster than should be possible, hit harder than any normal human. She circled him slowly. What are you? Enhanced. My people developed a serum that made me stronger, faster, built me to fight in a war. A manufactured soldier. Kira nodded slowly. We've got those too. Clone troopers, before they became stormtroopers. But you're not one of them. You're something else entirely. She made a decision. You hungry? Starving? Come on. I've got a camp in the lower levels. Empire doesn't patrol this sector much, mostly Hutt territory, and even they don't want the hassle of desert property disputes. The lower levels turned out to be a series of underground chambers connected to the old Moisture Farms foundation. Cooler than the surface, with glow panels providing dim light. Kira had set up a surprisingly comfortable operation. Sleeping area, weapons cache, communications equipment that looked cobbled together from a dozen different sources. She tossed Steve a ration pack and a clean canteen. Real water, not that recycled Imperial slop. Drink slow. Your body's probably dehydrated even if you don't feel it yet. Steve ate while Kira worked at her communication station, monitoring various frequencies. Imperial chatter, mostly. Patrol reports, search updates, the occasional merchant vessel checking in at spaceports. They're expanding the search radius, she said without looking back. Every garrison from here to the Dune Sea is on alert. You're officially designated a high-value target. She paused. There's also a bounty. 50,000 credits for information leading to your capture. Alive only. They want you intact. 50,000. Is that a lot? Enough to buy a decent ship and live comfortably for a year. You've got every bounty hunter and opportunist on Tatooine looking for you. She finally turned around. Which brings me to my question. Why should I help you instead of collecting that bounty? Steve met her gaze. Because you said you work for people who don't want the Empire to find them. That tells me you're not a fan of Imperial credits or Imperial rule. And because if you were going to turn me in, you would have done it already instead of bringing me here. Kira smiled slightly. Smart. But that doesn't answer why I should risk Imperial attention helping someone who just arrived and knows nothing about this galaxy. Because I'm good at what I do. Fighting tyranny. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. You've got enemies. The Empire, probably others. I can help with that. One man against the Galactic Empire? I've fought worse odds. Kira studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Maybe both. She pulled up a holographic display showing a star chart. All right, Captain Rogers. Here's the situation. The Empire controls most of the galaxy, Millions of systems, trillions of beings. They've got the military might to enforce that control through fear, overwhelming force, and those force-using inquisitors who hunt anyone who might threaten their power. She zoomed in on a section of the map showing scattered red indicators. The Rebel Alliance opposes them. They're a coalition of resistance cells, former Republic loyalists, and people who remember what freedom looked like. We hit Imperial targets, free prisoners, steal supplies, and generally make ourselves a nuisance. You said we, then corrected to they, Steve observed. Perceptive. Kira's expression hardened. I was Alliance. Did intelligence work, reconnaissance, target assessment. But I had a disagreement with Command about acceptable losses in a mission. Civilians died when they blew an Imperial garrison I was scouting. Command said it was necessary. I said it was murder. She shut down the display. So now I freelance. Help the Alliance when their missions don't cross my lines. Help refugees get off-world. Gather intel that might be useful someday. Steve understood that. He'd had his own disagreements with Command over the years. These rebels, you think they'd want my help? Depends. The Alliance is desperate for anyone with combat skills, especially someone who can go toe-to-toe with Imperial forces. But they're also paranoid about infiltrators and spies. You appearing out of nowhere with abilities nobody can explain? They'll assume you're an Imperial trick until you prove otherwise. How do I prove otherwise? Kira pulled out a small data chip. There's an Alliance cell operating in the Northern Territories. Small group, mostly focused on smuggling supplies and refugees. They just lost 3 people in an Imperial raid. She held up the chip. I've got intel on an Imperial convoy route. Weapons shipment heading to the Mos Eisley garrison in 2 days. Light security because they think the route is secret. The Alliance could intercept it, get weapons they desperately need. And if I help them do that, then maybe they trust you enough to listen to your story. Maybe they bring you into the fold. Or maybe they still think you're a spy and leave you in the desert. Kira shrugged. But it's better than waiting here for the Empire to find you. Steve considered it. He'd been in this galaxy for less than a day and was already being drawn into someone else's war. The smart play might be to lay low, learn more, avoid commitment until he understood the full situation. But people were suffering under Imperial rule. People needed help. And Captain America didn't sit on the sidelines when tyranny needed fighting. How do I find this Alliance cell? He asked. Kira's smile was genuine this time. I'll take you there myself. Call it an investment in chaos. She started gathering equipment, weapons, supplies, navigation gear. We leave before dawn, travel during the cooler hours. It's a 2-day journey on foot, one if we can steal a land speeder. Why help me? Steve asked. Really? She paused, considering. Because when I watched that footage of your escape, you didn't kill anyone. You could have. Saw how you fight. But every stormtrooper you took down, you left alive. Injured, maybe, but breathing. She looked at him with something like respect. In this galaxy, that kind of restraint is rare. Most people fighting the Empire become just as ruthless as the enemy. You're different. I'm a soldier, not a killer. There's a difference. Not to most people. Kira tossed him a desert robe. Get some sleep, Captain. Tomorrow we find out if the rebellion wants what you're selling. Steve lay on the bedroll she'd provided, shield within arm's reach, and stared at the ceiling. He was on an alien planet, being hunted by a galactic empire, about to join forces with rebels he'd never met to steal weapons from a convoy he'd never seen. Somehow, it felt familiar. Different galaxy, same fight. And Steve Rogers had never walked away from that fight in his life. They left the moisture farm 3 hours before dawn, when Tatooine's heat was merely oppressive instead of lethal. Kira led them through canyon systems she knew by heart, paths that avoided Imperial patrol routes and Tusken territory alike. Steve matched her pace easily, his enhanced endurance making the journey almost leisurely despite the rough terrain. "You're not even breathing hard," Kira observed after 2 hours of steady climbing. "That serum of yours is something else. It has its advantages." Steve scaled a particularly steep rock face in seconds, then reached down to help Kira up. She waved him off and climbed on her own, pride, or maybe just independence. They reached a ridge overlooking a vast salt flat as the first sun crested the horizon. In the distance, Steve could make out the tiny shapes of buildings. "That's Bastine," Kira said, pulling out macro binoculars and scanning. "Imperial garrison town. Used to be a peaceful trade hub before the Empire decided it needed a forward operating base in this sector." She handed Steve the binoculars. "Take a look. See what you're fighting against." Through the magnification, Steve saw Stormtroopers on patrol, AT-ST walkers, bipedal combat vehicles that looked both absurd and terrifying, and civilians going about their business with their heads down and fear in their body language. He'd seen it before in occupied France, in Hydra-controlled territories, the posture of people living under constant threat. "How many garrisons like this?" he asked. "On Tatooine alone? 6 across the galaxy?" Kira lowered her own binoculars. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The Empire is everywhere, Captain. That's what makes fighting them feel impossible. Nothing's impossible, just difficult." Spoken like someone who hasn't lost yet. They skirted around Bastine, staying well outside sensor range. Kira pointed out landmarks as they traveled. Moisture farms, crashed ships half buried in sand, territorial markers for Tusken clans. This was her home ground, and Steve filed away every detail. Knowledge was survival. By midday, the heat forced them to shelter in a cave system. They shared rations and water while Kira monitored her comlink, listening to encrypted chatter. "The rebels use a frequency-hopping protocol," she explained. "Changes every 4 hours based on a seed algorithm. Keeps the Empire from tracking their communications for long." She adjusted the frequency, and voices crackled through the static. Still no sign of the target. Expanding search to Sector 7. Bounties up to 75,000 now. Someone really wants this guy. Inquisitors offering an additional reward for Force-sensitive leads. He thinks the target might be. Kira switched it off. "They're obsessed with you. Imperial Command doesn't usually dedicate this much resources to one escapee." "It's the shield," Steve said, running his hand over the vibranium surface. "They can't identify the metal, can't replicate it. And the Inquisitor said, I don't register in something called the Force. That makes me an unknown variable." "The Force?" Kira's expression grew complicated. "You really don't know about it?" "The Inquisitor mentioned it. Said all living things are connected by it. But I'm somehow blank. A void. The Force is... it's complicated. Some people can manipulate it, move objects with their minds, see the future, influence thoughts. The Jedi used to be its guardians, keepers of peace. Then the Empire wiped them out, hunted them to near extinction. Now the only Force users left are either hidden or working for the Empire as Inquisitors." She paused. "If you really can't be sensed through the Force, that makes you dangerous to them. Their primary detection method doesn't work on you." Steve processed that. "So, I'm a blind spot in their surveillance network." "Exactly. And they hate blind spots." They traveled through the afternoon, the landscape gradually shifting from open desert to rocky badlands. Steve's tactical mind constantly assessed. Sight lines, cover positions, ambush points. Old habits. As the suns began setting, Kira led them to what looked like an abandoned mining operation. Rusted equipment lay scattered around a main structure built into the hillside. No lights, no movement. "This is it?" Steve asked. "This is the entrance." Kira approached a seemingly random rock formation and pressed her palm against a specific stone. It sank inward with a click. A section of the hillside slid open, revealing a tunnel with dim lighting. "After you, Captain." The tunnel descended for 50 meters before opening into a larger chamber. This one was clearly active. Computer terminals, weapons racks, a holographic display table, living quarters carved into the rock. And people. Maybe a dozen of them. Various species Steve didn't recognize, along with humans. All armed. All watching him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. A Duros, blue-skinned with large red eyes, stepped forward. He wore modified armor that had seen better days and carried a blaster pistol on each hip. "Kira, you said you had intel, not a stray." "This stray just embarrassed the Empire so badly they're offering 75,000 credits for his capture," Kira replied. "Jax, meet Captain Steve Rogers." "Captain, this is Jax Volran, cell leader." Jax studied Steve with the clinical assessment of a professional soldier. "You're the one from the security footage, the one who escaped an Imperial cruiser single-handedly." He circled Steve slowly. "My contact in Mos Eisley says you fought through 2 squads of Stormtroopers without killing a single one. That true?" "I don't kill unless there's no other choice," Steve said. "Noble, stupid, but noble." Jack stopped in front of him. "The Empire doesn't show that kind of restraint. They burn villages, execute prisoners, and glass entire planets to make examples. You fight them with one hand tied behind your back, you'll lose." "I've been fighting tyranny my whole life," Steve replied evenly. "Never needed to become what I was fighting to win." "Your whole life?" A human woman with scars running down the left side of her face stepped forward. "You don't look old enough for that kind of career." "I'm older than I look, and I've seen what happens when good people start using evil methods to fight evil. They become the thing they're trying to stop." The scarred woman, Sergeant Rin, Steve would learn, snorted. Philosophical. The Alliance loves philosophical types. Her tone suggested she didn't share that love. Kira stepped between them. "He's not asking for your approval. I brought him because he can help with the convoy intercept, and because the Empire wants him as badly as they want any of us. Enemy of my enemy. Or an Imperial plant designed to infiltrate our cell." Jax countered. "Convenient timing, convenient abilities, convenient story about being from somewhere nobody's ever heard of." Steve had expected this. "If I was an Imperial agent, why would they put a bounty on me? Why waste resources hunting me across the planet?" "Commitment to the cover. Make it believable." But Jax didn't sound fully convinced of his own argument. "Still, we'd be fools to trust you immediately." "Then don't." Steve unslung his shield and set it down. "Give me a chance to prove myself. Kira mentioned a convoy. Let me help with that." "Help how?" Rin demanded. "We don't know your capabilities, your training, or whether you'll break under pressure. For all we know, you'll give away our position the moment things go bad. So test me. Run me through whatever evaluation you use for new recruits. I'll pass." Jax and Rin exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Jax nodded. "All right. We've got a training course, obstacle run, combat scenarios, tactical assessment. You complete it to our satisfaction, we'll consider letting you join the convoy operation." He leaned closer. "But understand this, Captain Rogers. Out here, rank from your old military means nothing. You follow orders or you get people killed. Can you handle that?" Steve had worked with the Howling Commandos, with S.H.I.E.L.D., with the Avengers. He knew how to be part of a team without needing to lead it. I can follow orders when they make sense, but I won't follow orders that compromise my principles or get innocent people killed. Principles? Rin laughed bitterly. Those'll get you dead in this war. They've kept me alive through worse. Jax gestured to a human male with cybernetic implants running along his jawline. Thane, set up the course, full evaluation protocol. To Steve, you've got 1 hour, impress us or get out. The training course was brutal, not in its physical demands, which Steve's enhanced abilities handled easily, but in its design. It wasn't about raw capability. It was about decision-making under pressure, collateral damage assessment, and tactical creativity. The first scenario put him in a simulated Imperial checkpoint with hostages. Killing the guards was easy. Saving the hostages without alerting reinforcements required threading a needle. Steve used his shield to quietly disable the checkpoint's communications array, then systematically took down each guard with precise, non-lethal strikes. The hostages escaped with 0 casualties. The second scenario was worse. A choice between rescuing captured rebels or destroying an Imperial weapons cache before it could be deployed against a civilian population. He had time for one objective, not both. Steve chose the weapons cache. Strategic value outweighed personal attachment, and those weapons would kill hundreds if left intact. The simulation marked the captured rebels as executed. It felt like a punch to the gut. The third scenario was a direct assault on an Imperial convoy. Steve analyzed the formation, identified weak points, and orchestrated a strike using the terrain to funnel defenders into kill zones. But he also flagged civilian vehicles in the convoy and marked them as off-limits. The simulation criticized his efficiency, but noted 0 civilian casualties. Jax watched the entire evaluation from the observation room, arms crossed. When Steve emerged, sweating despite his enhanced endurance, the Duros's expression was unreadable. You chose the cache over the prisoners, Jax said flatly. Yes. We lost 3 people in that mission. You just let them die. Steve met his gaze. In the simulation, yes. Those weapons would have killed hundreds. 3 lives versus hundreds. It's not a choice I wanted to make. But it's the one that saves the most people. Cold logic. Necessary logic. I don't like it either. Rin stepped forward. You also refused to shoot civilian vehicles, even though they might have contained Imperial officers. Cost you time and tactical advantage. I won't kill civilians on the chance they might be enemies. That's how you become what you're fighting against. Even if it costs the mission. A mission that requires killing innocents isn't worth winning. The room fell silent. The rebels exchanged looks, some skeptical, some thoughtful, some openly hostile. Finally, Jack spoke. Your combat skills are exceptional. Better than anything I've seen outside of professional military training. Your tactical assessment is sound, even if it's overly cautious about collateral damage. He paused. But you've got a problem, Captain. You're fighting a war where the enemy doesn't play by your rules. The Empire will use those civilians as shields. They'll exploit your restraint. Then I'll find ways to win that don't compromise what I stand for, Steve replied. I've done it before. In your war, this isn't your war. Tyranny is tyranny. Evil is evil. Doesn't matter what galaxy it's in, the fight's the same. Jack studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Kira, you vouch for him? I do, she said without hesitation. Rin? The scarred woman grimaced. He's naive and idealistic, but he's competent. We need competent more than we need cynical right now. Thane? The cybernetic-enhanced man nodded. His approach to the convoy scenario was creative, unorthodox but effective. I'd work with him. Jax turned back to Steve. The convoy runs tomorrow at dawn. Imperial weapons shipment, blasters, thermal detonators, possibly some heavier ordnance. We hit it fast, take what we can carry, scatter before reinforcements arrive. It's a simple smash and grab. How many guards? Steve asked. Transport has a squad, 10 Stormtroopers, 2 scout troopers on speeder bikes for advance reconnaissance. Possibly an ATST if our intel is wrong and they're expecting trouble. And your plan? Jax pulled up a holographic map showing a canyon pass. The convoy has to go through here. Only route between the depot and Mos Eisley that can handle their transport size. We set charges on the canyon walls, create a rock slide to block their advance and retreat. Then we hit them from elevated positions with everything we've got. Fast and overwhelming. Steve studied the map, his tactical mind already identifying problems. What about the civilian traffic? This looks like a main thoroughfare. We'll clear it beforehand. Send someone to redirect any moisture farmers or traders. And if the Empire uses civilian vehicles as decoys? If they've learned your tactics and adapted? Jax's expression hardened. Then we adapt in the moment. This is guerrilla warfare, Captain. We don't get perfect intelligence or ideal conditions. We take calculated risks. Steve nodded slowly. The plan was sound for their resources and capabilities. Risky, but everything in war was risky. I'm in. What do you need me to do? You'll be with Rin's team on the North Ridge. Provide covering fire during the initial assault, then move in for cargo extraction once we've secured the transport. Jax pulled out a blaster rifle and handed it to Steve. You know how to use this? Point and shoot. I figured that much out. It's a little more complicated, but that's the basics. Thane will give you a crash course in Imperial weaponry. We've got 8 hours before we move out. Jax extended a hand, a very human gesture that Steve appreciated. Welcome to the rebellion, Captain Rogers. Try not to get us all killed. Steve shook the offered hand. I'll do my best. As the cell prepared for the operation, Steve found himself alone for a moment, checking his shield and organizing his borrowed gear. Kira approached, carrying an extra canteen. You did good, she said. Jax is paranoid about newcomers, but you won him over. By showing I'm willing to make hard choices. No, by showing you struggle with those choices, but make them anyway. She sat beside him. The Empire makes things simple. Obey or die, serve or be crushed. The rebellion is more complicated. We're trying to be better than what we're fighting. But sometimes that means we're less effective. People like you who can walk that line between effective and ethical. She trailed off. We need more people like you. I'm just one man. One man escaped an Imperial cruiser. One man has the Empire dedicating serious resources to recapture him. One man is sitting here about to help us pull off a supply raid we desperately need. Kira smiled. Sometimes one man is enough. Steve thought about his old life. The skinny kid from Brooklyn who got lucky with a serum, who became a symbol more than a soldier. He'd been one man then too, and somehow it had been enough. Maybe it would be enough here as well. Get some rest, Kira advised. Tomorrow you find out if the rebellion is what you hoped it would be, or if it's just another shade of gray in a galaxy full of them. Steve lay down on his assigned bunk, shield beside him, and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd fight alongside rebels against an empire. The details were different. Alien weapons, strange technology, a force he couldn't feel or use. But the cause was the same. Freedom, justice, protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. Captain America's mission, no matter what galaxy he was in. The canyon was called Vulture's Run, a narrow pass of jagged red rock that channeled the wind into a constant howl. In the pre-dawn light, the shadows were long and deep, perfect for concealment. Steve crouched on the north ridge beside Rin, watching the empty road below through macro binoculars. The rest of the strike team was hidden along both sides of the pass, a dozen rebels spread thin but determined. Rin was all business, her scarred face a mask of concentration. Check your charge packs, full power. Set blasters to stun is a luxury we don't have today. You see a white helmet, you put it down hard. Steve nodded, adjusting the strap on his borrowed blaster rifle. Thane had given him a quick but thorough lesson. Power settings, overheating thresholds, how to swap a Tabana gas canister. The weapon felt clumsy compared to his shield, but it was a tool, and Steve Rogers knew how to use tools. Remember the sequence, Rin continued, her voice low. Charges blow, rock slide blocks the rear. Jax's team hits the lead vehicle to stop the front. That traps the transport in the kill zone. We suppress from the high ground, they try to deploy, we cut them down. Simple. Nothing's ever simple, Steve murmured, scanning the terrain. His tactical mind was already running scenarios. What if the charges malfunctioned? What if the convoy had air support? What if the Empire had tipped to the trap and this was a counter-ambush? Do we have a fallback position? Fallback is run like hell. Rin didn't smile. We hit fast, we grab what we can, we scatter. The Empire controls the skies. We stay in the open more than 10 minutes after the shooting starts. We die. A crackle in their comlinks. Jax's voice, calm and steady. Scout 1 reports convoy is on schedule. 2 armored transports, 1 cargo hauler, 10 stormtroopers visible, 2 scout bikes out front. No ATST. Repeat, no walker. That's our window. A collective tension settled over the ridge. Steve felt it. The familiar pre-mission adrenaline, sharp and clean. He glanced at his shield, propped against the rock beside him. The familiar star and stripes looked impossibly out of place against Tatooine's rust-colored stone. A symbol from a world that might as well be a dream. Here they come, Rin whispered. The low growl of repulsor lifts echoed up the canyon walls first. Then the scout bikes appeared, slicing through the morning haze, their Imperial drivers scanning the cliffs with practiced indifference. They passed beneath Steve's position without slowing. The convoy followed. The lead transport was a bulky troop carrier, its slab-sided armor painted desert tan. The cargo hauler behind it was massive, a slow-moving beast laden with crates. The rear transport was identical to the first. Stormtroopers were visible through viewports, their white armor gleaming dully. Wait for it. Jax's voice was a whisper in their ears. Let the bikes clear the kill zone. Now. A series of sharp, concussive thumps rolled through the canyon. The charges, carefully placed by Thane the night before, detonated in sequence. The rear cliff face shuddered, then collapsed in a roar of dust and shattered stone, completely burying the road behind the convoy. The lead transport slammed on its repulsors, skidding to a halt just as Jax's team opened fire from the south ridge, their blaster bolts peppering the vehicle's front armor. Chaos, controlled and brutal, erupted. "Open fire!" Rin yelled, rising from her cover. Steve shouldered the blaster rifle and fired. His first shot went wide, the weapon's recoil and energy pulse unfamiliar. He adjusted, exhaled, and his second bolt struck a stormtrooper who had just spilled from the lead transport, knocking the soldier back against the hull. The rebels around him laid down a withering hail of red energy, pinning the Imperial squad in the narrow road. The stormtroopers reacted with disciplined fury. They formed a defensive perimeter around the cargo hauler, using the transports for cover. Their return fire was precise, stitching up the cliffs. A rebel to Steve's left cried out as a bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. "Medic!" Rin shouted, not breaking her own firing rhythm. Steve saw a trooper try to flank their position, clambering up a scree slope. He dropped the blaster rifle, too imprecise at this range, and grabbed his shield. In one fluid motion, he stood, took aim, and threw. The vibranium disc sang through the air, a streak of red and blue. It struck the trooper square in the chest with a hollow clang, the impact hurling the soldier back down the slope. The shield rebounded off a rock pillar and flew back to Steve's waiting hand, as if magnetized. Rin stared at him for a split second, then snapped back to the fight. "Don't just stand there. Keep firing." But the display had been seen by others, rebels and Imperials alike. The Stormtroopers' fire concentrated on Steve's position. Bolts hammered the rocks around him, some deflecting off his shield with bright sparks. He became a focal point, drawing attention away from the other rebels. Exactly what he'd intended. "Jax, we're pinned." Rin barked into her comlink. "We can't advance to the hauler." "Working on it." Jax's reply was strained. "They've got a heavy repeater in the lead transport. Thane, take it out." A moment later, a rocket from the south ridge streaked down and exploded against the lead transport's weapon mount. The repeater fell silent in a shower of molten metal. The Imperial fire lessened slightly. "Go! Go! Go!" Jax ordered. Rebels from both ridges began descending using grappling lines and natural paths. Steve went with them, shield raised, moving with enhanced speed that made him a difficult target. He reached the canyon floor first, directly in front of the cargo hauler's massive ramp. Two Stormtroopers emerged from behind the rear transport, blasters rising. Steve didn't break stride. He slammed the shield into the first, then pivoted, using the edge to disarm the second with a sharp crack against the rifle's barrel. A follow-up strike to the helmet dropped the trooper. The ramp to the hauler began to lower with a hydraulic whine. More troopers inside. "Rogers, stop that ramp!" Jax yelled. Steve didn't think. He acted. He jammed the edge of his shield into the descending ramp's mechanism. Vibranium met durasteel gears. The metal screamed, then ground to a halt. The ramp stuck halfway open. A trooper inside fired blindly through the gap. Steve bashed the shield forward, the impact crumpling the trooper's armor and silencing the shots. "Clear," he shouted. Rebels swarmed the immobilized convoy. Jax led a team to secure the lead transport while Rin and others rushed the hauler. Steve provided cover, his shield deflecting the dwindling return fire from the few remaining Stormtroopers who had taken cover among the rocks. It was over in minutes. The last trooper dropped his blaster and raised his hands. The rebels quickly bound the surviving Imperials, 6 of them, including the 2 scouts who had been knocked from their bikes in the initial blast. "Get those crates," Jax ordered, pointing to the hauler. "Priority on weapons and medical supplies. We have 5 minutes before their distress call brings a Star Destroyer down on our heads." Steve helped, his enhanced strength making light work of the heavy munition crates. He worked alongside Thane, the cybernetic man nodding at him with newfound respect. "Not bad, off-worlder." They were loading the last crate onto a repurposed land speeder when Rin, who was monitoring the Imperial comms, went pale. "Jax, we've got an inbound signature. Fast mover. It's not a TIE fighter." A shadow fell over the canyon. Steve looked up. A ship descended, sleek and predatory, unlike the blocky Imperial designs he'd seen. It was a dark, angular shuttle. Its wings swept forward like a bird of prey. It settled on the canyon floor 50 meters away, its engines kicking up a storm of dust. The side ramp dropped before the landing gear had fully extended. From the darkness within, a figure emerged. Tall, clad in flowing dark robes that seemed to drink the morning light. Inquisitor Kovic. He wasn't alone. 4 purge troopers, black-armored soldiers with enhanced gear and menacing electro-staffs, fanned out behind him, their movements synchronized and lethal. The rebel team froze, a crate half-lifted between them. Kovic's gaze swept the scene, past the captured stormtroopers, past the rebels, and locked onto Steve. A cruel smile touched his scarred lips. "Captain Rogers, I told you we would meet again. You've been busy?" Jack stepped forward, blaster raised. "This is our operation, Inquisitor. Walk away." Kovic didn't even look at him. He flicked his fingers. One of the purge troopers moved impossibly fast. A blur of black armor, and Jax's blaster was ripped from his hand. The trooper backhanded the Duros with a gauntleted fist, sending him sprawling. Rebels raised their weapons. The purge troopers raised their staffs, crackling with blue energy. "Don't," Steve said, his voice cutting through the tension. He stepped out from behind the landspeeder, shield in hand. "He's here for me." "Perceptive," Kovic said, igniting his lightsaber. The crimson blade cast a bloody glow across the sand. "You have caused significant embarrassment to the Imperial Navy, and you have allied yourself with terrorists. The Emperor has taken a personal interest in your anomaly." "I'm not going back with you," Steve stated, planting his feet. "You misunderstand." Kovic began to advance, his purge troopers flanking him. "My orders are to ascertain your capabilities, to test you. If you cannot be turned to the Empire's service." He leveled his lightsaber. "Then you will be terminated as a threat to galactic security." Rin looked from the Inquisitor to Steve, her expression one of horrified understanding. The Empire hadn't just sent a retrieval team, they'd sent an executioner. "Rebels," Kovic announced without turning his head, "you are guilty of treason against the Galactic Empire. The penalty is death, but in his mercy, the Emperor offers you a choice. Kill Captain Rogers, and you will be granted a swift execution. Protect him, and you will learn the true meaning of suffering." He was dividing them, offering a brutal, false choice. Steve saw the conflict on the rebels' faces, fear warring with loyalty. "Don't listen to him," Steve said, his voice steady, carrying across the canyon. "He's not going to let any of you go. This is what tyrants do. They make you choose between bad and worse, so you forget there was ever a good option." He looked at Jax, who was wiping blood from his mouth, at Rin, at Thane and the others. "Get the supplies and get out of here. That's your mission. I'll handle this." "You can't fight an Inquisitor alone," Rin hissed. "I don't intend to fight him alone," Steve said, his eyes never leaving Kovic. "I intend to fight him on my terms." He threw his shield, not at Kovic, but at the cliff face above the Inquisitor's shuttle. The vibranium disc struck a precariously balanced boulder with a monumental clang. The rock shuddered, then broke free, plummeting toward the ship. Kovic's composure broke for a millisecond. "The shuttle!" The purge troopers reacted, but it was too late. The massive boulder crashed onto the shuttle's forward section, crushing the cockpit and severing one of the wing assemblies with a shriek of tearing metal. In that moment of distraction, Steve charged. He covered the distance to Kovic in 3 enhanced strides. The Inquisitor, snarling, brought his lightsaber around in a vicious horizontal slash meant to bisect Steve at the waist. Steve met the plasma blade with his shield. The impact was a cataclysm of sound and light, a shrieking, sparking collision of 2 impossibly durable materials. The lightsaber didn't cut through. The vibranium didn't break. Instead, the energy of the blade splashed across the shield's surface in a corona of crimson fire, dissipating harmlessly. The force of the blow drove Steve back a foot, grinding his boots in the sand, but he held. Kovic's eyes widened in genuine shock. "Impossible!" Steve shoved forward, using the shield to batter the lightsaber aside. He drove a super soldier-powered fist into Kovic's midsection. The Inquisitor flew back 10 feet, hitting the sand hard, his breath knocked out. "Now," Steve yelled to the rebels. "Go." Jax didn't need to be told twice. "Fall back. Speeder teams, move, move." The rebels scrambled, grabbing their captured supplies and dragging wounded comrades. The purge troopers moved to intercept, but Steve was already among them. He fought not to kill, but to disable, his shield and fists a blur. He shattered a staff, crumpled a chest plate, swept a trooper's legs out from under him. Kovic rose, his face a mask of rage. He raised a hand, and Steve felt a terrible, invisible pressure clamp around him. Not on his body, but on the very air he was breathing. It was the Force, a telekinetic grip meant to crush or choke. Steve strained against it. He could move, but slowly, as if fighting through deep water. He saw Kovic stalking toward him, lightsaber raised for a killing thrust. "Your tricks don't work on me, remember?" Steve gritted out, forcing one foot forward. "I'm a void. Maybe you can push the air around me, but you can't push me." With a roar of effort, he broke free of the grip, the sudden release sending him stumbling forward. Kovic's killing thrust stabbed past his shoulder. Steve brought the edge of his shield down on the Inquisitor's wrist. Bone cracked. Kovic screamed, dropping his lightsaber. The blade deactivated before it hit the sand. The last purge trooper charged. Steve spun, caught the electro staff on his shield, and delivered a kick that sent the trooper tumbling into the wreckage of the shuttle. He turned back to find Kovic clutching his broken wrist, hate burning in his eyes. The rebels were gone, their speeders disappearing into the canyon's side passages. The mission was complete. "This isn't over," Kovic spat. "He will come for you. He sees you now." Steve retrieved his shield, his breathing even. "Let him come." He turned and ran, leaving the wounded Inquisitor and his broken team amidst the captured convoy. He didn't look back. He had made his choice, drawn his line in the sand. He had fought for the rebellion, and he had won. But as he sprinted to catch up with the retreating rebels, Steve knew Kovic was right about one thing. This was far from over. He had just declared war on the Empire in a way they could not ignore, and in the shadows of a galaxy far, far away, a darker presence had indeed taken notice. The safe house was a smuggler's den buried in the underlevels of Mos Eisley, a maze of corroded piping and stolen power lines that stank of engine grease and despair. The mood inside was not triumphant. They had the weapons, crates of blasters, thermal detonators, and enough medical supplies to keep the cell operational for months. But they had also drawn the direct ire of an Inquisitor, and everyone in the cramped room knew what that meant. Jax paced before the holographic display, which now showed an Imperial alert bulletin with a grainy, captured image of Steve's shield. Bounty's been raised to 200,000 credits, dead or alive. They've amended the alive-only clause. He shot Steve a look that was more weary than angry. "They want you erased." Steve sat on a crate, cleaning sand from his shield with a rag. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to escalate things for your cell." Rin barked a laugh from the corner where she was suturing a gash on Thane's arm. "Sorry? You sorry you saved our Shebs back there? That Inquisitor would have slaughtered us and taken the supplies. You stood your ground. You even," she said, her voice dropping slightly with awe. "Blocked a lightsaber. I've never seen that. No one has." "The shield is unique," Steve said simply. He didn't elaborate. The less they knew about vibranium's otherworldly origins, the safer they all were. Kira, who had been monitoring comm traffic, swiveled in her chair. The official Imperial story is that the convoy was destroyed in a catastrophic rock slide. No mention of rebels, no mention of you. They're covering it up. Why? Thane grunted, wincing as the needle pulled through his skin. "Because they failed," Steve said, looking up. His voice was calm, analytical. A single unenhanced human, not even force-sensitive, humiliated a trained Imperial squad and wounded an Inquisitor. That's not a story the Empire wants circulating. It's a crack in the image of invincibility. He'd seen the same logic in Hydra, in the Red Skull's regime. Propaganda required perfection. Flaws had to be buried. Jack stopped pacing. It doesn't matter why. What matters is they will come back, and harder. This safe house is burned. We need to disperse. The supplies get split between the other cells in the Arcani sector. He turned to Steve. You're a strategic asset now, Rogers, and a massive liability. The Alliance Command needs to know about you. Decide what to do with you. I'm not an asset to be done with, Steve replied, standing. The motion drew every eye in the room. I'm a soldier. I fight where I'm needed. You need help moving these supplies, securing new positions, training your people? I'll help. But I'm not reporting to some distant command for debriefing while there's work here. It's not that simple, Jax insisted. The rebellion is a network. We have protocols. A man with your abilities appearing from nowhere. You think the higher-ups won't want to vet you? Interrogate you? They might even try to replicate whatever was done to you. The thought sent a cold wave through Steve. The memory of Dr. Erskine's death, of the decades of failed attempts to recreate the serum, of the Winter Soldier program. It was a history of good intentions curdling into horror. My abilities are not a blueprint. They're the result of a unique circumstance and a good man's legacy. I won't be the cause of that legacy being twisted into a weapon factory. The room was silent, the weight of his statement hanging in the recycled air. It was Kira who broke the stalemate. There might be a middle ground. She brought up a star chart. The Alliance isn't one monolith. It's a tapestry, and some threads are rougher than others. There's a cell, calls themselves the Outriders. They operate in the mid-rim, hitting soft Imperial targets, shipping, payroll convoys, communications relays. They're effective, but they're not officially under Alliance command. More of a mutual aid agreement. Mercenaries? Steve asked, distrust clear in his tone. Survivors, Kira corrected. Their leader is a former Republic judicial officer named Iden Vorsa. She doesn't care where you come from, only what you can do and whose neck you're willing to put on the line. They could use someone with your skills, and they're far enough from command that you could prove your worth on your own terms. Jax considered it, rubbing his chin. The Outriders, I've heard of them. Reckless. They pulled off the Lantillian fuel raid last cycle. And they've been a thorn in the side of Moff Parole for 6 months, Rin added, a hint of admiration in her voice. They work clean. No civilian casualties. High precision. Steve studied the star chart. It was an off-ramp. A chance to fight the Empire without becoming a lab rat for a rebellion he still didn't fully understand. A chance to operate on the ground, where he could see the immediate impact of his actions. It felt right. How do I contact them? You don't, Kira said, smiling. They contact you. I can put a beacon out on a secure channel they monitor. A coded message about an unusual asset seeking independent deployment. If they're interested, they'll send a rendezvous point. Steve looked at Jax. The Duros leader sighed, then nodded. Do it. He's earned his choice, and we need to vanish. The next 36 hours were a blur of clandestine movement. The cells split the supplies and melted away into the endless sprawl of Tatooine's underworld. Steve stayed with Kira in a different safe house, a tiny apartment above a junk dealer in Mos Eisley's port district. The message was sent. The reply came as Steve was repairing a tear in his uniform. A line of text scrolled across Kira's secured datapad. Docking Bay 94. The Wayward Sun. 1 hour. Come alone, come armed, come ready to work. Bay 94 was in the oldest, most dilapidated section of the spaceport. The Wayward Sun was a Corellian G9 Rigger-class light freighter, its hull pitted from micrometeorites and old blaster scars. It looked like 1,000 other junk heaps, which was probably the point. As Steve approached, the boarding ramp lowered. No one emerged, an invitation or a trap. He climbed the ramp, shield held loosely but ready. The interior was dim, cluttered with cargo nets and spare parts, but meticulously organized. A human woman stood in the center of the hold, arms crossed. She was perhaps in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent features and gray streaking her dark hair. She wore practical, worn combat gear, a blaster pistol on her hip, and an expression of intense scrutiny. "Captain Rogers," she said. Her voice was cool, no nonsense. "I'm Iden Vorsa. Kira's message said you could fight, think, and had a problem with authority. Accurate?" "Accurate," Steve confirmed, meeting her gaze. "She also said you took on an Inquisitor and lived. That's less believable." "Believe what you want. I'm here to fight the Empire, not to convince you." A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched Iden's lips. "Good. We have a job. A simple extraction. An Imperial defector, a logistics coordinator stationed at an orbital dry dock over Sullust. He has data on Imperial supply lines through the Corellian trade spine. He's gotten cold feet and is holed up in a service module. The Empire knows he's compromised. They've sent a team to tidy up. So we get to him first." "We do, but there's a complication." She tapped a control, and a hologram of a sleek, dagger-shaped ship appeared. "The Imperial team is being led by Commander Rook. He commands an Arquitens-class light cruiser, the Swift Vengeance. He's good, thorough, and he'll have the module locked down tight." Steve studied the schematics of the dry dock, a sprawling complex of shipyards and habitation rings. "You have a plan to get past his security?" "We have a plan. It's dangerous. It requires someone to create a diversion significant enough to pull Rook's attention and forces away from the service module long enough for my team to slip in, grab the defector, and slip out." She looked directly at him. "Kira's message suggested you were good at drawing fire." Steve understood. They didn't just want a soldier. They wanted a target. A loud, obvious, disruptive target. He was to be the flaming arrow shot into the hornet's nest. "What's the diversion?" Iden's smile widened, and it wasn't friendly. "You're going to board the Swift Vengeance." The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. The Wayward Sun, using a stolen Imperial transponder code, would launch Steve via mag tether onto the hull of the Arquitens class cruiser as it made its final approach to the dry dock. From there, he would infiltrate the hangar bay, cause as much chaos as physically possible, ideally without destroying the ship's engines or life support, and hold the Imperial's attention while Iden's team, in a stealth-modified shuttle, extracted the defector. "You'll be alone, behind enemy lines, on a warship with a crew of 200, Iden said flatly as they hurtled through hyperspace, the blue swirls casting eerie light in the freighter's cockpit. "The moment you're detected, every stormtrooper and security droid on that ship will be hunting you. Our window is 12 minutes. After that, Rook will realize it's a diversion and lock down the dry dock." Steve checked the mag boots and the compact ascension cable they'd given him. 12 minutes is a long time. Iden looked at him, her professional detachment wavering for a moment with genuine curiosity. "Who are you, really? No normal being is this calm before a suicide run?" "I've done crazier things," Steve said, thinking of the Valkyrie of the helicarrier, of diving through a portal in New York with a nuclear bomb. And it's not a suicide run if you win. The wayward sun shuddered as it dropped from hyperspace. The Sullust system filled the viewport. The volcanic planet, the sprawling orbital dry docks like glittering metal cobwebs. And there, moving with stately menace, was the swift Vengeance, its elegant lines belying its deadly purpose. Transponder active. They're reading us as a supply skiff with engine trouble. The pilot, a Twi'lek named Nera, reported. We're cleared for close approach. Get to the airlock. Steve stood, hefting his shield. Iden blocked his path for a second. Remember, the goal is noise, not destruction. Blow up the ship and our defector dies in the lockdown. Make them look at you. Make them fear you. Understood. The airlock cycled open, and the cold silence of space swallowed him. The cruiser loomed, massive and dark. The wayward sun maneuvered close, and a magnetic tether shot out, connecting with a soft thunk. Steve attached his cable and jumped. The ride was a silent, stomach-lurching arc across the star-flecked void. He landed on the cruiser's hull with a muffled clang, the mag boots locking securely. According to the schematics, the secondary hangar access hatch was 30 meters aft. He moved quickly, the experience surreal. The curved hull of a starship, the infinite blackness of space, the distant sun. It was a battlefield unlike any other. He reached the hatch, pried open the maintenance panel with his enhanced strength, and hot-wired the manual override. The hatch slid open. He dropped inside, into a dimly lit maintenance corridor. He could hear the distant hum of the ship, the chatter of comms. He followed the sound, moving like a ghost. He emerged onto a gantry overlooking a secondary hangar bay. 2TO. Fighters were being serviced by drones. A squad of 4 Stormtroopers stood guard by the main door. Steve took a breath. Time to make some noise. He didn't shoot. He jumped. He landed 20 feet below in the center of the hangar floor with a crash that echoed. The Stormtroopers spun, blasters rising. "Intruder in Hangar Bay 2, one screamed into his comlink. Steve threw his shield. It took out the console controlling the hangar's magnetic containment field. With a rising whine, the field failed. Atmosphere began rushing out into space through the still open secondary hatch he'd used. Alarms blared. Decompression warnings, intruder alerts, general panic. The Stormtroopers fired. Steve weaved between the shots, closing the distance. He disarmed the first with a sharp strike, used the soldier's body as a shield against the second's fire, then took down the remaining 2 with precise, non-lethal throws of his shield against their helmets. He wasn't here to kill crew. He was here to cause a spectacle. He sprinted to the hangar's main control room, smashed through the door, and found a terrified technician. "The ship-wide comm," Steve said, his voice calm amidst the blaring sirens. "Put me through, now." The tech, trembling, complied. Steve grabbed the mic. His voice echoed through every corridor, every deck of the Swift Vengeance. "Attention, Imperial crew. This is Captain Steve Rogers. Your ship is compromised. Your security has failed. I am in your hangar. I will be in your engine room next. And then your bridge. You have one choice. Stop me." He dropped the mic. Outside, he could hear the pounding of boots. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The entire ship's security force was now converging on Hangar Bay 2. He checked the chrono on his borrowed vambrace. 6 minutes down. He smiled, a fierce, determined expression in the flashing red alarm light. The hornet's nest was well and truly kicked. Now he just had to survive it for 6 more minutes and make sure every single hornet was looking only at him. Chaos was a quantifiable asset. Steve had learned that in the streets of occupied Bruges, in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath Hydra bases, controlled, directed chaos could paralyze a force 10 times your size. The swift vengeance was now a textbook example. His announcement had the intended effect: panic, followed by a furious, focused response. But focus on him meant inattention elsewhere. As Steve burst from the hangar control room back into the main bay, he was met by a full platoon of stormtroopers pouring through the main blast door. Their fire was disciplined, a wall of red energy seeking to pin him down. He didn't give them the chance. He moved through the storm. Using a servomotor cart as a springboard, he launched himself in a high arc over their front line. His shield deflected the handful of bolts that came close. He landed behind them, amid the support personnel and engineers who were scrambling to contain the atmospheric leak. They scattered as he plowed through, a whirlwind of red, white, and blue, and unstoppable momentum. His goal wasn't the bridge or the engines, as he'd threatened. It was the ship's primary power distribution nexus, 2 decks down. Iden's briefing had highlighted it: a heavily fortified but non-critical system. Damaging it would cause massive internal disruptions, lighting failures, door malfunctions, gravity generator fluctuations. Without crippling the ship or endangering the dry dock, perfect chaos. He took a service shaft, descending hand over hand, faster than the turbo lift could have carried him. He emerged into a corridor pulsing with conduit light. Here the response was different. These were not frontline troopers, but black-clad naval security armed with heavier rifles and shock batons. They'd set up a barricade outside the distribution room's reinforced door. "Contain and subdue. He's not to reach the Nexus," an officer shouted. Steve didn't break stride. He threw his shield sideways, not at the men, but at the wall-mounted control panel for the corridor's environmental systems. The vibranium smashed through it in a shower of sparks. Instantly, the overhead lights died, replaced by strobing emergency strips. A second later, the artificial gravity stuttered, sending the security team lurching off balance. In the disorienting strobe-lit half-gravity, Steve was a ghost. He moved among them, a series of precise, debilitating strikes. A baton meant for his head was caught and snapped. A point-blank blaster shot was absorbed by his shield, the energy dissipating with a flash that blinded the shooter. He was a force of nature, efficient and relentless. In 30 seconds, the security team was a groaning pile at the door. He planted the small shaped charge Iden had given him on the door's locking mechanism. "Fire in the hole," he muttered, taking cover behind his shield. The explosion was contained but violent. The door blew inward. Steve charged through into the power distribution nexus, a cavernous room dominated by humming cylindrical towers and crackling transfer conduits. A handful of terrified engineers cowered behind consoles. "I'm not here for you," Steve said, his voice cutting through the din. "Get out, now." They didn't need telling twice. As they fled, Steve located the main regulator for the secondary power grid. According to the schematics, overloading it would send cascading failures through half the ship's internal systems for approximately 20 minutes. He raised his shield, took aim, and brought it down on the regulator housing with all his enhanced strength. The impact was like striking a bell the size of a building. Metals screamed, energy arced wildly, lashing out like angry serpents of blue lightning. Conduits along the ceiling exploded in sequence, showering the room in sparks and smoke. The deep hum of the ship's systems became a pained, fluctuating whine. Alarms that were already screaming took on a new, more urgent tone. The lighting across the entire deck died, plunging everything into the hellish red of backup batteries. Steve heard distant shouts, the crash of sealed doors malfunctioning and locking troopers in or out, 8 minutes down. His job was done. Now came the hard part, surviving the hurricane he'd unleashed. He bolted from the Nexus, back into the corridor. The plan was to retreat to a pre-designated secondary hangar, a small shuttle bay used for inspection pods. Iden's team would make a pass in the wayward sun to scoop him up in the confusion. But Commander Rook was, as Iden had warned, good. Steve rounded a corner and found his path blocked not by more troopers, but by a new type of enemy. Two dark, humanoid figures in segmented armor, their faces obscured by helmets with glowing red optical sensors. They carried not blasters, but wicked, double-bladed electro-staffs that hummed with menace. Imperial Royal Guards, not the Emperor's own, but a lesser variant assigned to high-priority field commanders. Rook had brought his personal protectors. They moved in unison, silent and deadly. The first lunged, staff a blur of crackling energy. Steve blocked with his shield, but the impact was different. The energy didn't just dissipate. It surged back through the vibranium with a painful feedback jolt that numbed his arm. These weapons were designed to counter energy shields. He grunted, pushing back, and kicked out at the guard's knee. The armor held, but the force staggered the figure. The second guard attacked from the flank. Steve spun, narrowly avoiding a thrust that would have pierced his side. He was fast, but they were preternaturally coordinated, their movements augmented by their armor and training. He was fighting a delaying action, and he was losing seconds he didn't have. He couldn't afford to get bogged down. A blaster shot rang out, striking the wall between the guards. They didn't flinch, but their focus split for a microsecond. Steve glanced to the side. Iden Vorsa stood at the far end of the intersecting corridor, a smoking blaster rifle in her hands. Her face was set in a grimace. Change of plan, Rogers. Dry dock security is mobilizing faster than expected. Extraction point is compromised. We're going out the way you came in, now. She laid down covering fire, not to hit the guards, but to force them to take cover. Steve used the opening. He feinted towards one guard, then changed direction, sprinting past them towards Aiden. One guard swung his staff. Steve ducked, feeling the crackling energy graze his back, searing through his uniform. "Follow me," Iden barked, already running back the way she'd come. We have about 90 seconds before Rook realizes the defector is gone and throws everything at us. They ran through the stricken ship, a maze of flashing lights and shouting voices. Iden moved with the confidence of someone who had studied the schematics just as hard as Steve had. She led him through engineering accessways and across gantries over shuddering machinery. "How's the defector?" Steve asked, vaulting a fallen conduit. "On the shuttle with my team. Nervous but intact. Your fireworks worked perfectly. They never saw us coming." She skidded to a halt at a sealed blast door. "This leads back to the secondary hangar you crippled. Atmosphere should be partially restored by now, but it'll be swarming." She slapped a breach charge on the door. "On my mark, we go hard and fast. Our ride is making a very risky docking maneuver right now. We do not keep her waiting." The charge blew. The door buckled inward. Beyond was chaos. The hangar was partially repressurized, but debris floated in the low gravity. Emergency teams were trying to secure the area. And in the center of the bay, hovering just beyond the ruined magnetic field, was the wayward sun, its dorsal airlock aligned with a jagged hole in the hangar's outer hull. Nera was holding the freighter steady with breathtaking precision, mere meters from the crashing together of the two hulls. Between them and that airlock were at least 20 Stormtroopers, finally organized and forming a firing line. "No time for subtlety," Iden yelled. She raised her rifle and charged, firing on full auto. Steve was right beside her, shield forward. This was a head-on assault, pure and simple. Blaster bolts filled the air. Steve's shield became a blur, deflecting shots, protecting Iden as much as himself. He threw it, not to attack, but to disarm, sending it skimming across the deck to knock the legs out from under a cluster of troopers. They were halfway to the ship when a new sound cut through the cacophony. A deep, resonant hum. A figure descended from the upper gantry, landing between them and the wayward sun with a heavy thud that shook the deck plates. Commander Rook. He was a tall man, clad in an immaculate gray officer's uniform adorned with medals. He didn't look angry. He looked coldly, intellectually fascinated. In his hand, he held not a blaster but a lightsaber. Its blade was a pale, icy blue. "Captain Rogers," Rook said, his voice calm and projecting easily. "The anomaly, Iden Vorsa, the terrorist, an interesting partnership." "I'm not a terrorist," Iden spat, raising her rifle. "You attack Imperial property, subvert Imperial personnel, and sow chaos. The definition seems apt." Rook's gaze remained on Steve. "My inquisitorial colleague described your resistance to the Force. A null point, a fascinating tactical disadvantage you've turned into a weapon, but you understand nothing of true power." He ignited his lightsaber. The blue blade was different from Kovik's, colder, more precise. "You will both be captured. The data you've stolen will be recovered, and you, Captain, will be studied until every secret of your being is laid bare for the Empire's use." Steve stepped in front of Iden. "You talk a lot for a man who's about to lose." He charged. Rook moved to meet him, his lightsaber flashing in a professional, efficient killing stroke. Steve didn't try to block it head-on this time. He'd learned from Kovik. At the last second, he dropped and slid, shield raised above him like a roof. The lightsaber slashed across the vibranium, deflecting upward. Steve kicked out, sweeping Rook's legs. The commander was good. He used the Force to augment his leap, flipping backward and landing gracefully. But the move had taken him a precious few feet away from the airlock. "Go!" Steve shouted to Iden, surging to his feet and pressing the attack against Rook. He fought not to win, but to occupy. His shield was a battering ram, his fists a blur, forcing Rook to defend, to parry, to use all his skill to keep the indestructible disc and the super soldier behind it at bay. Eden didn't hesitate. She sprinted the last few meters and leapt through the airlock into the waiting freighter. "Rogers, now!" Her voice screamed from his comlink. Steve feinted high with the shield, then spun, throwing it with all his might, not at Rook, but at the damaged hangar control console one last time. The console exploded in a final shower of sparks, and the magnetic field, already unstable, failed completely. The remaining atmosphere in the hangar rushed out into space with a roar. The sudden explosive decompression yanked at both of them. Rook, caught off guard, was pulled off his feet, his connection to the Force allowing him to anchor himself to the deck at the last second. Steve, expecting it, was already in motion. He used the decompressive pull to add velocity to his own leap, sailing across the hangar toward the wayward sun. He crashed through the airlock as Nera, with a pilot's nerves of steel, slammed the throttles forward. The freighter tore free of the cruiser with a screech of tearing metal. Steve rolled to his feet inside the airlock as the doors sealed. He looked back through the viewport. The swift vengeance, wreathed in internal fires and chaos, was already shrinking behind them. Commander Rook stood at the edge of the gaping hull breach, his blue lightsaber still lit, watching them go. Iden clapped a hand on Steve's shoulder, her face flushed with adrenaline and triumph. 12 minutes and 17 seconds. You are one hell of a diversion, Captain. In the hold, a nervous-looking Celestin in a torn Imperial uniform clutched a data crystal. The mission was a success. But as the wayward sun leapt to hyperspace, leaving the wounded cruiser behind, Steve felt no victory. He had drawn a line, and the Empire had sent its best to cross it. He had won this round, but the fight had changed. He was no longer just an escaped curiosity. He was a proven threat. And in the shadows of the Empire, Proven threats received the Empire's full, terrible attention. He had wanted to fight the war on his terms. He was about to learn that the Empire got a vote too. The wayward sun emerged from hyperspace in the Olanet system, a patch of interstellar nowhere with a single dead star and a scattering of barren planetoids. Their destination was a rogue asteroid, its surface scarred with the makeshift docks and shielded habitats of the Outriders' mobile base. It wasn't a home. It was a hiding place that could be abandoned at a moment's notice. In the days following the raid on the Swift Vengeance, Steve had settled into the rhythm of the cell. He trained with them, sharing hand-to-hand techniques that left even the most seasoned fighters bruised and impressed. He helped fortify the base, his strength turning tasks that required machinery into matters of simple exertion. He was earning his place, not through words, but through action. Yet, a distance remained. They called him Captain with respect, but also with a hint of awe that bordered on unease. He was the man who had fought an Inquisitor and a commander with a lightsaber and lived. He was the walking legend, and legends made for poor company. Iden found him in the hangar, polishing his shield. The starfield reflected in the vibranium, making the white star seem to float in deep space. "We've decoded the defector's data," she said, leaning against a stack of crates. "It's bigger than we hoped. Full logistical routes, garrison strengths, even preliminary schematics for a new class of Imperial troop carrier." She paused. "The Alliance High Command has been informed. They want the data, and they want to meet the asset who made its retrieval possible." Steve didn't look up. "I told you my position on that." "I know, and I've relayed it." The response was interesting. She handed him a datapad. It displayed a text-only communique. "To Cell Leader Vorsa from Alliance High Command, encrypted source. Unregistered asset, Rogers. Your assessment noted. Direct debriefing waived. New priority, attach asset to verification mission. Target, Imperial Research Facility, Gamma 7, coordinates attached. Intelligence suggests facility involved in force-related weapons development. Potential tie to asset's anomalous nature. Mission parameters, infiltrate, confirm research, exfiltrate with any relevant data. Asset's performance will serve as evaluation. Fulfillment grants provisional alliance status and operational autonomy. Steve read it twice. They're offering a field test. Prove I'm useful, prove I'm not a threat, and they leave me alone to fight my way. Essentially, Iden confirmed. Gamma 7 is a ghost. It doesn't appear on any public star chart. The coordinates put it in the deep core, perilously close to Imperial Center itself. It's a suicide run, Rogers. That's the point. If you're an Imperial plant, you'll either sabotage the mission or die trying. If you're genuine, well, you might still die. But you'll die proving your loyalty. Steve set the datapad down. A deep core Imperial lab, possibly studying things that could explain why he was a void in the Force. The connection was too compelling to ignore. It wasn't just a test. It was an answer. "We'll need a plan," he said finally. Iden grinned, the fierce expression of a predator sensing worthy prey. "I've already started. Gamma 7 is a listening post turned black site. Heavily shielded, minimal garrison, but absolutely state-of-the-art internal security. Getting in will require a very specific kind of delivery." The plan was, once more, audacious. An Imperial prison barge, the Chains of Law, made a monthly supply run to Gamma 7, delivering nutrient pastes and spare parts. The Outriders had a contact, a disgruntled supply clerk who could slot 2 prisoners into the manifest. A captured rebel scout, Iden, and an unidentified human male of unknown origin, subdued and sedated, Steve. Their hidden gear, including Steve's shield, would be smuggled aboard in a crate of defective sensor components. Once inside, Iden explained in the briefing room, holographic schematics floating between them, we get offloaded into a holding cell in the lower detention block. From there, we have a 12-hour window before the barge departs. We break out, navigate to the central research spire, access the main data core, get what we need, and get back to the barge before it leaves. And if we miss our window? Thane asked, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the schematics. Then we're trapped in one of the most secure Imperial facilities in the galaxy, with no way out and every alarm blaring, Iden said flatly. So we don't miss it. The insertion went smoothly. The boredom and routine of the Imperial logistics corps was their greatest ally. Steve, playing his part, allowed himself to be injected with a mild sedative that would fool medical scanners. He lay limp in a force-cuffed transport sled as he and Iden were offloaded in Gamma 7's stark, sterile receiving bay. The air was cold, recycled, and smelled of antiseptic and ozone. The detention cell was a featureless gray cube. The moment the doors sealed, Steve's eyes snapped open, the sedative metabolized to nothing by his enhanced system. He flexed his arms, and the force cuffs, designed for normal humans, snapped with a faint pop of dying energy. Eden was already free, retrieving a hidden lockpick from a seam in her prison uniform. Right on schedule. Gears in maintenance locker B-17, one level up. Cameras in this block are on a 30-second loop. We move now. They became shadows in the belly of the beast. The facility was a masterpiece of Imperial design. All gleaming surfaces, harsh lighting, and a pervasive silence broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant march of security patrols. Steve's shield, recovered from its hiding place, felt reassuringly solid on his back. They avoided patrols, bypassed security doors using codes provided by the Alliance contact, some outdated, some still valid, and ascended through service ducts toward the research spire. The deeper they went, the stranger the atmosphere became. The sterile cold gave way to a palpable, almost electrical tension in the air. Steve felt it as a pressure against his skin, a faint buzzing in his teeth. It wasn't the Force. He was still a null to it. But something adjacent, something manufactured. They reached an observation gallery overlooking the central research chamber. Iden sucked in a sharp breath. Below, in a vast space dominated by towering, humming capacitors and arrays of focusing crystals, was a scene from a nightmare. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a containment field, was a shard of black crystal that seemed to swallow the light around it. Around it, technicians in sealed suits manipulated controls. And along the walls, in transparent cryocells, were beings. Humans, Twi'leks, Rhodians, others. Some were clearly force-sensitive, their features marked by strain even in unconsciousness. Others were like Steve, non-sensitive, but physically exceptional. Soldiers, athletes, outliers. They're not just studying the Force, Iden whispered, horror in her voice. They're trying to weaponize the absence of it. That crystal, it's synthetic, a Force dampener. They're testing it on them. She pointed to a screen displaying scrolling data. Look, subject Gamma 12, midichlorian count neutralized, connection to Force severed, psychological collapse follows. They're creating voids, like you. Steve stared, a cold fury settling in his gut. This was the dark mirror of Dr. Erskine's work, not enhancement, but eradication. Not unlocking potential, but carving out a piece of a being's soul to see what weapon could be made from the hollow space left behind. We need that data, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Accessing the main data core required passing through the chamber floor. Their only route was a catwalk high above the researchers. They were halfway across when the alarms finally sounded. Not because of them. a containment breach. One of the cryocells had failed. A human subject, a man with the build of a laborer, stumbled out of his cell, screaming soundlessly in the vacuum-sealed chamber below. The black crystal in the center pulsed, and the man's screams cut off as if switched off. He collapsed, not dead, but utterly, terrifyingly empty. The researchers scrambled, more concerned with their experiment than the subject. Security blast doors began sealing sections of the chamber. "Our window just slammed shut," Iden said. "The data core is on the other side of that chamber. We have to go through." They dropped onto the main floor amidst the chaos. Steve's shield was a blur, deflecting stun blasts from panicked technicians. Iden disabled security consoles, trying to override the lockdown. They fought their way toward the data core access terminal. They were almost there when the main blast door to the chamber hissed open. Not for security, to admit a visitor. Darth Vader stood in the doorway. His presence filled the vast space, a wave of pure, suffocating darkness that even Steve, a void in the Force, could feel as a physical weight. The respirator's rhythmic hiss became the only sound in the suddenly silent chamber. The researchers froze, then fell to their knees. Vader's helmeted gaze swept past them, past the failed experiment, and landed squarely on Steve. He took a step forward, his black boots echoing on the deck. "The anomaly," Vader's voice boomed, deep and mechanized, resonating in Steve's bones. "The one who stands outside destiny. I have felt the disturbances you cause in the Force. Ripples of nothingness." Steve stepped forward, placing himself between Vader and Iden, who was frantically working at the terminal. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You are a question," Vader stated, igniting his lightsaber. The crimson blade screamed to life, its light casting the chamber in a hellish glow. "The Emperor wishes you studied. I wish to understand what makes you immune to the power that binds this galaxy." He didn't attack. He gestured with his free hand. The synthetic black crystal in its containment field shattered. A wave of nothing erupted from it. It wasn't an explosion, but an erasure. The humming capacitors died. Lights flickered and went out. The Force-sensitive subjects in their cells writhed in silent agony. Steve felt only a strange, hollow coldness. But Iden cried out, clutching her head as if struck. The crystal's power was a weapon against the Force, and Vader had just unleashed it. "The ultimate defense against the Jedi," Vader mused, standing unaffected in the epicenter of the null field. "To carve a sanctuary of silence where their power cannot reach. You, Captain, are a natural expression of this principle. Let us see if your mortal strength can withstand what comes next." From the shadows behind Vader, two new figures emerged. Not stormtroopers, not royal guards. They were tall, clad in dark armor, adorned with strange, angular runes. Their movements were fluid, powerful, and utterly silent. In their hands, they carried weapons that were hybrids of technology and something older. Vibroblades crackling with captured energy from the shattered crystal. "These are the Null Troopers," Vader said. "Forged in the silence you represent. They cannot be sensed. They cannot be predicted by Force precognition. They are the answer to the Jedi, and you are their proving ground." The Null Troopers charged. Their speed was breathtaking, their coordination flawless. Steve raised his shield. Their first strikes landed simultaneously, and the impact was unlike anything he'd felt. The energy in their blades didn't deflect. It resonated, sending painful shockwaves through the vibranium that jolted his arms to the shoulder. This was a fight for survival in its purest form. No tactics, no philosophy. Just strength against strength, will against will, in a bubble of unnatural silence, where the Force itself was dead. Steve Rogers, the super soldier from another world, against the Empire's attempt to weaponize the void he represented. And in the doorway, Darth Vader watched, a dark lord conducting a terrible experiment. The world narrowed to the next blow, the next block, the next desperate breath. The Null Troopers were a perfect counter. Their anti-force armor made them ghosts to any normal Jedi senses. But Steve didn't rely on the Force. He relied on eyes, ears, and a century of combat instinct. Even so, they were faster and stronger than any foe he'd faced since the Chitauri. Their weapons, charged with the dampener's strange energy, hit with the force of a freight train and left his limbs buzzing with numbness. He couldn't fight them both head-on. He backpedaled, using the shattered lab equipment for cover. A vibro blade sheared through a console where his head had been a second before. He spun, shield leading, and slammed the edge into the trooper's side. The armor held, but the brute force knocked the figure into its partner, buying him a heartbeat. "Iden, status," he shouted, his voice raw. "Almost. Got it," she yelled back, her fingers flying over the terminal, her face pale from the lingering null field effect. 30 seconds. 30 seconds was an eternity. The troopers recovered, separating to flank him. Steve made a decision. He charged the one on the left, feinting a shield bash before dropping low and sweeping its legs. As it fell, he leapt over it, putting both troopers on the same side for a moment. He turned and threw his shield with every ounce of his strength, not at the troopers, but at the base of the towering capacitor array behind them. Vibranium met machinery with a deafening crack-whump. The capacitor, already destabilized by the crystal's destruction, buckled. A torrent of blue lightning erupted, earthing itself across the two Null Troopers. They convulsed, armor smoking before collapsing. The shield rebounded back to Steve's hand. He stood panting, the smell of ozone and burnt circuitry thick in the air. A slow, mechanical clapping echoed through the chamber. Darth Vader took a step forward, his lightsaber still casting its bloody glow. "Impressive. You utilize environment and tool with a soldier's pragmatism. You fight not with mystical energy, but with physics and will. A pure expression of martial power." He tilted his helmet. "It is a pity you serve a lost cause." "The cause of freedom is never lost," Steve shot back, settling into a defensive stance, shield held ready. He was bruised, exhausted, but unbroken. "Freedom is an illusion. Order is the only truth. The Empire brings peace through strength. Your rebellion brings only chaos and death." Vader extinguished his lightsaber, hooking it to his belt. He raised both hands. "You have proven resistant to the Force's direct touch. Let us see how you fare against its indirect application." He didn't attack Steve. Instead, he gestured toward the mangled wreckage of the lab. A twisted spar of durasteel, half the size of a speeder bike, ripped free from the ruin and shot toward Steve like a spear. Steve braced, raising his shield. The impact drove him back 5 feet, his boots screeching on the deck. Before he could recover, Vader ripped a heavy blast door from its housing and sent it spinning like a giant discus. Steve dove, the door whirring over his head and embedding itself in the far wall. This was a new kind of fight. Vader was using the environment itself as a weapon, telekinetically hurling tons of metal and machinery with terrifying precision and power. Steve was a flea-dodging sledgehammer swung by a giant. He couldn't close the distance. He could only survive. A console flew at him. He shattered it with his shield. A support beam followed. He ducked. A wave of shattered transparasteel shards came next, a blinding, cutting storm. He covered his face with his shield, feeling 100 stinging cuts across his legs and back. "You are durable," Vader observed, his voice calm amidst the destruction. "But you are finite. Your strength wanes. Your body tires. The dark side is endless. Another massive piece of debris hurtled toward him. This time, Steve didn't try to block or dodge. He ran toward it. At the last possible second, he leapt, planting a foot on the flying wreckage and using it as a springboard to propel himself through the air, directly at Vader. It was a move born of desperation and super soldier agility. He sailed over the last 20 feet, shield raised like a battering ram, aiming to crash into the Dark Lord himself. Vader's hand snapped up. Steve froze in midair, 10 feet from his target. The invisible grip was absolute, crushing. It wasn't the vague pressure Kovic had used. This was the fist of a god closing around him. He strained, every enhanced muscle screaming, but he could not move an inch. Direct application may fail. Vader's respirator cycled. But the Force governs physics, Captain. It governs the air in your lungs, the blood in your veins, the space between atoms. The pressure increased. Steve's ribs creaked. The edges of his vision darkened. He heard Iden scream his name. With a final defiant roar, Steve did the only thing he could. He threw his shield. He didn't have his full strength, pinned as he was. But he didn't need to hit Vader. The shield flew true, not at the Sith Lord's body, but at the control panel on his chest. The life support systems that regulated his suit, his breathing, his very existence. Vader, focused on maintaining his crushing grip, was caught off guard. He brought his other hand up to deflect, but the vibranium disc struck the panel with a sharp clang and a shower of sparks. For a split second, the grip faltered. The red optical sensors of Vader's helmet flickered. The rhythmic hiss of the respirator stuttered, becoming a ragged, wet gasp. Steve dropped to the floor as the telekinetic hold vanished. He didn't pause. He rolled, came up, and caught his returning shield. Vader was staggered, one hand clutching his damaged chest panel, the other held out as if to ward off a blow. "Iden, now!" Steve yelled. "Data secured, let's go!" They ran, not back the way they came, but toward the emergency shaft Iden had identified, a maintenance conduit that led straight down to the lower docking bays. As they fled, Steve glanced back. Vader stood amidst the wreckage, his form straightening. The sparks at his chest panel died. The respirator's steady hiss resumed, deeper, angrier. He made no move to pursue. He simply watched them go, a monument of dark fury. They reached the chains of law with minutes to spare, blasting their way onto the barge as it began its undocking sequence. As the ship lumbered away from Gamma 7 and leapt into hyperspace, Steve stood at a viewport, watching the blighted facility shrink to a speck. He had faced the heart of the Empire's darkness. He had looked into the mask of its greatest champion and survived. He had not won. Vader had been inconvenienced, not defeated. But he had drawn a line that even a Sith Lord could not cross with ease. Iden approached, holding a data crystal. "This is everything. The dampener research, the null trooper protocols, location of other black sites." She looked at him, her expression solemn. "The Alliance will call this a victory, a major one. You've earned your autonomy, Captain. More than that, you've earned your legend." Steve took the crystal. It felt heavy. This isn't about legend. It's about stopping them. This research, they want to build an army of voids, to fight the Jedi by erasing the Force itself. That's not a weapon. It's a genocide of the spirit. "I know," Iden said quietly. "And now the rebellion knows. Because of you." Days later, in a hidden rebel base in the Outer Rim, Steve Rogers stood before a holographic council of Alliance leaders. Mon Mothma, her image serene but her eyes sharp. General Dodonna assessing him like a new piece of artillery. Others, their faces obscured for security. "The data is invaluable," Mon Mothma said. "You have our gratitude, Captain Rogers, and our trust. Your provisional status is hereby made permanent. You may operate with the Outriders or independently, as you see fit. The Alliance will provide support where possible." "Thank you," Steve said. "But I need one thing clarified." "Name it." "My mission. I fight the Empire. I protect the innocent. I won't execute orders that target civilians. I won't participate in terror tactics. If that's a problem, I'll operate truly independently." There was a long silence. General Dodonna nodded slowly. "Captain, after the report from Gamma 7, there's a growing sentiment in the Alliance Council that we have, at times, mirrored our enemy's ruthlessness too closely. Your methods, your restraint, may serve as a necessary reminder of what we are actually fighting for. Your terms are acceptable." It was more than he'd hoped for. Steve returned to the Outriders, not to a hero's welcome, but to the quiet respect of warriors who had seen what he'd done. He had a place now, a cause, a way to fight. That night, in the quiet of his quarters, he activated a small holoprojector. It showed a star map of the galaxy, with Imperial strongholds marked in red, rebel cells in blue. It was a vast, sprawling war, bigger than any he had ever known. But in a corner of the map, a new symbol glowed softly. A simple star, not the Imperial crest, not the rebel starbird. His symbol, placed over the Tatooine system where it had all begun, a marker of his first stand. He was Captain America. He was a man out of time, out of place. He was a void in the Force, an anomaly that disrupted the plans of tyrants and Sith Lords alike. He was one man, but as he looked at the map, at the countless points of light awaiting liberation, he knew one man could be enough to tip the scales. He had done it before. He would do it again. In a galaxy far, far away, a new hope was born. Not from a mystical bloodline, but from an unwavering heart. And it wore a shield. The legend of the Star-Spangled Soldier began not with a fanfare, but with the silent impact of a vibranium shield in the Tatooine sand. Captain America's arrival fractured the Empire's certainty, proving that their grip on the galaxy could be challenged by something they could not comprehend, corrupt, or control. He did not join the rebellion so much as reshape it, reminding weary freedom fighters that victory without honor was no victory at all. His war was not in the stars, but on the ground, in the streets and trenches where people lived and died. He became a symbol, not of the Force's power, but of the power of an indomitable will. The Empire learned to fear the void he represented. Inquisitors amended their tactics. Commanders fortified their facilities. Darth Vader himself filed the encounter at Gamma 7 away, not as a failure, but as an unresolved equation, a variable that required further study. The fight had changed for everyone. The Rebel Alliance now had a champion whose very existence undermined Imperial doctrine, while Steve Rogers found, in this strange and war-torn galaxy, a purpose that transcended time and space. The battle for freedom is eternal, and in a distant corner of that endless struggle, a super soldier stood ready, his shield a promise that no matter how dark the Empire, a single spark of courage could ignite the dawn.